Chapter 1492. Tang Jun himself was a Dharma cultivator, so the use of Dharma treasures was very important to him. For example, if Tang Jun had a Dharma treasure like a seal in his hands, it would be much easier to deal with the south. Tang Jun had Dharma treasures, but he came from a place like Qingli Dao world. How could he have any good stuff? According to the classification of Dharma treasures in the universe, the 2 Dharma treasures he had were below 3-star, which could be said to be very poor. Lu Yi could not tell the grade of Yu Yao's seal. After all, he was only a constellation mansion, but it was definitely above 3-star. Otherwise, it could not have such strange and powerful power. Currently, Tang Jun was the only Yu Yao on Matchless Island. He could be said to be the representative of Matchless Island's combat power. If he could become stronger, he could deal with more complicated and dangerous situations in the future. If not for this consideration, why would Lu Yi give him 1,000,000 spirit jades? Kid, where did you get rich? Tang Jun looked excited. 1,000,000 spiritual jades was not something an ordinary person could take out. Even a small force might not have so many spiritual jades that they could use. Consider it a loan. Remember to return it to me when you have it. Lu Yi looked at him. Tang Jun chuckled and pretended not to hear. When Lu Yi asked for travel expenses, he did not say anything about lending it to him. Now that the spirit jades were in his hands, there was no way he would return it. But then again, if he really used these spirit jades to buy 2 decent Dharma treasures, his personal strength would definitely increase by a lot. When he met Nanxing again, it was clear who would be stronger and who would be weaker. Kid, you're good. I'll accept your filial piety. In the future, as long as I don't die on the Vientiane Sea, I'll ensure your safety. Tang Jun left happily. He didn't waste any time, and immediately set off for the island of versatility. He was prepared to listen to Lu Ye's advice and buy 2 decent magic treasures. With 1,000,000 spirit jades, he could buy 2 5-star magic treasures if his requirements weren't too high. The battle had just ended, and the fate of Koi Island was a lesson. Therefore, no one would have any ideas about Matchless Island for a while. Tang Jun could leave quietly and return soon. Not long after Tang Jun left, Chu Shun ran over and sat in front of Lu Yi, saying, "Senior brother, I want to go to Zhaili Island to recruit more people." Previously, Lu Yi had advised him not to recruit constellations that were not strong enough, and he had listened to the advice. However, things were different now. If Unparalleled Island wanted to become stronger, they would need more manpower. At the very least, there had to be enough people to maintain the operation of the formation. In today's battle, the protective formation on the island could not even display 30% of its power, because there were too few people. Lu Yi said, "You're from the Cheiling world. Is there anyone you can trust in the Cheiling world, or the Wanxiang galaxy?" Chu Shun shook his head and smiled bitterly. "To be honest, before I was promoted to a constellation, I had been cultivating hard in the Thousand Sunset sect and rarely left. Hence, I don't know many people. There are some trustworthy senior brothers and sisters in the Thousand Sunset sect, but most of them are cultivating in other spiritual islands. Even if I invited them, they might not be willing to come." Lu Yi nodded, knowing that this was the truth. For example, the group of cultivators from Jinli Island might have come from a certain domain in a certain galaxy. They did not have a suitable place to stay in the Wanxiang Sea, so they wanted to snatch Unparalleled Island when they saw that it was a good place to stay. However, the Thousand Sunset sect was a sect in a local domain, and they had Jiu Yin behind them. It was easy for them to occupy a spiritual island. The spiritual island they occupied would definitely be better than the current Unparalleled Island. Chu Shun inviting them was equivalent to asking them to come and help. With the agreement with Jiu Yin, not to mention that those people might not be willing to come, Chu Shun himself was not willing to do so. "Then we can only spread the news," said Lu Yi. Chu Shun said, "I think so too. In this vast Wanxiang Sea, there are countless constellations that have no place to stay. Even late-stage constellations can be found everywhere. In today's battle, Unparalleled Island has made a name for itself. If we spread the news, there will be many people coming to join us. However, senior brother, don't worry. I will be strict with the selection. I will definitely not let people with ulterior motives enter Unparalleled Island. With a place like Fair Island, Chu Shen could check the past of these cultivators from the Fair book on Fair Island. Through their resumes, he could see the character of these cultivators. As long as he was strict with his control, it would not be a big problem even if he recruited some outsiders. Since you have a plan, go ahead and do it. Lu Yi nodded. Suddenly he thought of something. What's the situation with that Ban Ci? Speaking of which, before today, he had only met Ban Ci once. It was Ban Ci who took the initiative to visit him when she first came to Unparalleled Island. After that, she left and did not have any interaction with him. However, in today's battle, this Ban Ci's performance was not like an ordinary constellation. Chu Shen scratched his head and said, I'm not too sure about this senior sister's background. She was recruited by Lucky Star from Fair Island. She came with Elder Tang. Together? Lu Yi frowned. It's just a coincidence. When Elder Tang went to Fair Island, Lucky Star just came to an agreement with Ban Ci. Senior brother, do you think there's something wrong with her? Lu Yi shook his head. I'm just a little curious. With such strength and background, she should be on the ranking list. However, her name is not on the ranking list. It's really strange. Chu Shen agreed. But senior brother, she shouldn't have any bad intentions. You saw the battle today. If senior brother didn't help in time, I'm afraid she would have died. That's what I'm curious about. He was just recruited and received a modest monthly salary. To Ban Ci, Wushuang Island was just a place to stay. Was there a need to work so hard? After thinking for a while, Lu Yi said, Is there such a person in your coachman circle? Chu Shen was not stupid. He immediately connected the dots. Senior brother. You mean, senior sister Ban Ci was sent by my mother? If not, there was no way to explain why Ban Ci did what she did. But I've never seen this person in my life. She might not be from the coachman circle. Lu Yi said thoughtfully. Perhaps she was a cultivator from another realm, in the myriad phenomenon galaxy. With Jiu Yan's status, it wouldn't be difficult for her to find someone Chu Shen had never seen before to protect him. However, Ban Ci's performance today was too shocking. Even Lu Yi couldn't forcefully restrain Yu Yao as a celestial constellation. Of course, Ban Ci paid a heavy price in the end. From this, it could be seen that Ban Ci was not an ordinary person. Her name was not on the ranking list, so it was very likely that she had used a pseudonym. While Lu Yi and Chu Shen were discussing, Pu Ku and Spectre were also together. Spectre said with a solemn expression, Old Pu, do you feel it? Pu Ku drank his wine leisurely, his shifty eyes looking at the sisters Kai Yu and Kai Xing, who were walking by not far away. Hearing Spectre's words, Pu Ku casually said without turning his head, What? Don't you think Li Taibai looks like someone? Like who? Pu Ku looked as if his mind was wandering. Think about it carefully. Who does he look like? Don't you feel it at all? I do. Pu Ku smiled. Straight and slender. It's rare that they're twins. They're practically carved from the same mold. I can't tell who is who. Spectre grabbed Pu Ku's head with one hand and forced him to turn his head. She said resentfully, What are you looking at? What's there to see? Look at me. I'm talking to you. Pu Ku said, I can't look away. Just say it, I'm listening. Spectre was furious. Why can't you look away? Did they force you to look? Pu Ku slowly turned his gaze over with a fascinated expression. No, I want to look. Spectre was confused. She didn't know what he was talking about. She sighed and said, Did you hear what I said? Pu Ku took another sip of wine. Are you trying to say that Brother Taibai looks like Fa Wuzuan? Don't you think so? Spectre's expression was stern. They don't just look alike. They're practically the same person. If it were others, they wouldn't have felt it so clearly. However, they had formed a formation with Fa Wuzuan to fight the dried skeleton general. The three of them had fought a difficult battle, and the experience was unforgettable. Now that they were in the formation, they could feel it especially clearly. But they're not the same person. Pu Ku frowned. How can you be so sure? Spectre sighed and said, I contacted Fa Wuzuan with the sound talisman in front of Li Taibai, and then I received a reply. Pu Ku was surprised. They're really not the same person? I thought Brother Taibai was Fa Wuzuan. He thought for a moment and said, if they're not, then they're not. It doesn't matter. There were so many constellations on the myriad phenomenon sea. It wasn't strange to say that two people were similar. I can't talk to you. Spectre left angrily. She couldn't tell anyone about Fa Wuzuan and the mermaid territory, so she could only sulk alone. Recently, many constellations had come to Peerless Island to join them. This was because Peerless Island's island master Chu Shun had spread the news that Peerless Island had just been established and wanted to recruit talented cultivators. This was undoubtedly very attractive to cultivators who came from various galaxies and didn't have a place to stay, especially since Peerless Island was a spiritual island. Even if there was no monthly salary, cultivators were willing to join such a place. Chu Shun personally received the constellations that came to join them. He asked about their origins, and then had the lucky star, who was guarding Zhongzheng Island, check the records of Zhongzheng Book. If there were any suitable candidates, they would stay. However, if there were any flaws in their records, they would be rejected. Not only did constellations come to join them, but they also attracted a few Yu Yao. Chu Shun politely refused cultivator Yu Yao's invitation. Firstly, it would be difficult to guard against them if the Yu Yao had any ill intentions. Therefore, the best way was to not accept any of them. Secondly, there was a limit to the number of Yu Yao each faction could have on the myriad phenomenon sea. If Peerless Island accepted a foreign Yu Yao, it would take up a slot. If one of their own became a Yu Yao in the future, they might have to find another way. Chu Shun knew that both Pu Ku and Spectre weren't far from becoming Yu Yao. Naturally, the Yu Yao slots on Peerless Island would be reserved for their own people. End of chapter. Chapter 1493. The Battle of Carp Island had caused many forces that had designs on Peerless Island to give up. The forces that could not wait to attack Peerless Island at this time were not considered strong. Carp Island was already one of the best, but even so, Carp Island had suffered heavy losses in the battle. How would the other forces dare to provoke them again? Especially recently, Peerless Island had recruited many reliable people, and their overall strength had increased by a lot. As long as Peerless Island could survive this initial period of development, the situation would become more and more stable in the future. When one or two Yu Yaos appeared on the island, they would be able to gain a firm foothold. Lu Ye's main body had been staying in the cave these days, using the power of the talent tree to deduce spirit runes. After consuming a lot of fuel, the new aura-concealing spirit rune had been successfully deduced. What he was deducing now was the life origin technique. Strictly speaking, the life origin technique that had formed with Hupu was not a spirit rune, but a secret technique. However, after cultivating for so many years, Lu Ye's knowledge and experience had long been different from before. From the perspective of a spirit rune master, any method in this world could be seen as an extension of spirit runes. Therefore, even if the life origin technique was a secret technique, he could find a way to reverse it and transform it into a corresponding spirit rune. As long as he could deduce the corresponding spirit rune for the life origin technique, he would be able to find a way to remove it. This way, he would not have to worry about his safety implicating Hupa and Yi in the future. However, this matter was much more difficult than simply deducing spirit runes. If the talent tree had not undergone 3 transformations, Lu Yi would not have been able to come up with this idea. However, the 3 transformations of the talent tree had given him this opportunity. While his main body was deducing spirit runes, his clone was moving around outside. The main reason was that Ghost was always suspicious. She would often run over and contact Fa Wuzuan with the sound talisman in front of him, as if she wanted to see through his disguise. In such a situation, Lu Yi could only leave his clone outside. On this day, Lu Yi suddenly felt the sound talisman vibrate. He picked it up and found that it was a message from Chao Xiang. Normally, the manager of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce would not take the initiative to contact him. Now that he had contacted him, it was probably because there was some progress in a matter he had entrusted. It wasn't news about the Jade Conch Galaxy. Since the last time he got the wrong information from Chao Xiang, Lu Yi didn't ask him to continue investigating. Fellow Taoist Li, in 7 days, our Chamber of Commerce will hold an auction. At that time, there will be something you need. If you want to participate, please try to collect as many spirit jades as possible. Those things are quite expensive. Of course, Lu Yi knew that the item was expensive, but he didn't lack spirit jades now, so it shouldn't be a problem for him to get it. Phoenix Sky Blue Crystal. This was an extremely rare mineral that was mainly used to refine magic treasures. It was also one of the few treasures that could upgrade a spirit treasure to a magic treasure. The treasures that cultivators used against their enemies started from the lowest level of spirit tools, followed by magic tools, then spirit treasures, and above that were magic treasures. It was actually not difficult to upgrade a spirit artifact to a magic artifact, and then to a spirit artifact. As long as there were suitable materials, a skilled weapon refiner could do it. Lu Ye's coiling mountain saber had been upgraded step by step in this way. When he first obtained the coiling mountain saber, it was only a spirit tool. However, upgrading a spirit treasure to a magic treasure was a huge chasm. This was because the nature of the two was completely different. One was for cultivators below Yu Yao, while the other was for cultivators above Yu Yao. This kind of upgrade not only required a skilled weapon refiner, but also a few extremely special materials. Even if the other materials were expensive, the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce could buy them. Only the rarest material was not available in stock. Phoenix Sky Blue Crystal was an item that could only be found by chance. Cultivators of other sects didn't have this problem at all. They could just upgrade their strength to Yu Yao and buy a few suitable magic treasures. This problem was unique to weapon refiners. Weapon refiners were extremely dependent on their weapons. For example, when Lu Yi had exchanged the coiling mountain saber for the crimson dragon saber, it would more or less affect his strength, even if the crimson dragon saber was about the same size and weight as the coiling mountain saber. Therefore, after weapon refiners advanced to Yu Yao, they faced an awkward problem. They could either give up on the weapon that had accompanied them for so long and exchange it for a magic treasure of similar quality, or they could think of a way to upgrade their weapon. Lu Yi wasn't willing to exchange. The coiling mountain saber had been with him for so many years and had experienced countless battles. It could be said that it was one of the things he relied on to reach his current level. It wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of Lu Ye's body. With the coiling mountain saber in hand, he could display his full strength. If he exchanged it for another weapon, it would more or less affect his strength. Since he wasn't willing to exchange it, he could only upgrade it, even if he had to pay a huge price. However, there were so many weapon refiners in the world. Lu Yi wasn't the only one who had to face this problem. Other weapon refiners also had to face this problem when they advanced to Yu Yao. This made the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal priceless. It was only in a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea, where cultivators from many galaxies gathered and goods came and went frequently. Elsewhere, finding a piece of Phoenix Sky's blue crystal was harder than ascending to the heavens. The 10,000 Elephant Chamber of Commerce had obtained a piece of Phoenix Sky's blue crystal from somewhere and wanted to auction it off. This was good news for Lu Yi. Although he wasn't in a hurry to advance to Yu Yao right now, he would eventually take that step one day. He had asked Qiao Xiang to keep an eye on this item in preparation for his advancement to Yu Yao in the future. If he missed this opportunity, he might not be able to find a second piece in a short time. Checking the spirit jades he had, Lu Yi found that he had about 50 million spirit jades. Lu Yi estimated that this much spirit jades should be enough for him to use. According to the Starry Sky's categorization of the value and grade of treasures, these spirit jades could almost buy a 9-star magic weapon. It should be enough to buy a piece of Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. There should be a lot of people who desired the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal, but not everyone would be willing to spend a lot of money to buy it. This thing was worth at most 10 million spirit jades. Lu Yi was in a good mood. He waited quietly. A few days later, he walked out of the cave leisurely and set off for the Island of Versatility. The Peerless Island was some distance away from the Island of Versatility, so he had to get there in advance. Having said that, he had never participated in an auction before. On the contrary, he had held an auction at the Constellation Hall. However, that auction only involved the twin Qi-connected array disk. The auction items of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce would definitely not be so simple. He could go and broaden his horizons and see what good items were on display at the auction. After leaving the Peerless Island, he took out the star boat he had bought for 300,000 spirit jades and rushed to the island of Versatility. The journey was quite peaceful. Under normal circumstances, when people came and went on the 10,000 Elephant Sea, there would be very few unnecessary conflicts unless they were enemies. It was unlikely that people would start fighting just because they didn't like each other on the way. They were all at least Constellation Realm cultivators, so they still had some self-control and composure. After all, no one knew who the other person was. It would be disastrous if they provoked someone they shouldn't. On the way, Lu Yi changed his appearance and clothes and put away the mountain pan saber. He didn't know what would happen at the auction, but there would definitely be a lot of people fighting for the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. Therefore, it was better to keep a low profile to avoid being targeted. When he arrived at the island of Versatility, he went to the familiar ferry as usual. He paid the fee of spirit jades and got a pass to enter the island. The first time he came here, Lu Yi had fantasized about when he would be able to occupy a spiritual island and make some new things to attract the interest of the cultivators of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Then, he would build a ferry and collect tolls to make a fortune. At that time, he only dared to think about it. But now in just 2 years, he really had a spiritual island. Although the Peerless Island was under Chu Shen's control in name, the reason why it could be revived was because of the minor Constellation Hall's seawater reversal. Therefore, the Peerless Island was basically his. In 2 years, the changes were so great. His cultivation had also advanced from the early stage to the late stage. The only pity was that he didn't have any family or friends to share his joy within the vast 10,000 Elephant Sea. When he arrived at the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce, the hall was very lively. Lu Yi looked around and immediately walked to the side. On the way here, he had already asked Chao Xiang about it, so he knew what to do at this moment. There was a private room in this direction. Inside, the steward of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce was entertaining the guests who were preparing to participate in the auction. The famous top forces didn't need to come here, as the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce would arrange seats for them in advance. However, individual guests like Lu Yi had to come here first to verify their identity. After all, the auction wasn't a place where just anyone could enter. If there were no restrictions, it would definitely be overcrowded like the 88th hall in the past. Only those who were qualified to participate in the auction would be given a pass to enter the auction site. When he arrived, he saw a voluptuous woman wearing revealing clothes sitting there. Seeing Lu Yi, the woman stood up and bowed. Her almond-shaped eyes flashed. "Honored guest, are you preparing to participate in the auction?" Lu Yi nodded expressionlessly. He then took out a storage ring that he had prepared in advance and handed it over. There was nothing inside, only 10 million spirit jades. The woman stretched out her hands and respectfully received it. After scanning it with her divine sense, her smile became even more charming. "Honored guest, you have a lot of capital. I hope you can buy what you like in the auction." She respectfully handed the storage ring back to Lu Yi along with a jade token with the words, Ding Jiu written on it. Lu Yi took it and put it away, then turned and left. There was still 1 day before the auction began. He planned to go to the scattered market to see if Anja had returned. Although they had left a musical note imprint, Anja would definitely send him a message if he returned. Since there was no message, there was a high chance that Anja didn't reply. After all, Anja had said that he would return to this world to transfer goods. It would take about half a year for a round trip. However, the scattered market was on the Myriad Elephant Island, not far away. Moreover, deducing spirit runes had consumed a lot of his talent tree's fuel reserves. Lu Yi could use this opportunity to buy treasures with the ignition attribute to replenish it. End of chapter. Chapter 1494. Lu Yi walked around the scattered market, but he did not see Anja at his previous stall. Instead, there was a cultivator he did not know, and he was selling things that Lu Yi did not need. As expected, Anju was not back yet. Lu Yi could only buy fire tribute treasures, which cost him a few million spirit jades. It was still early, and he had nowhere to go. He pondered for a moment, then continued to wander around the scattered market. Compared to the myriad elephant chamber of commerce, Lu Yi preferred to come to places like this, but he did not know why. Just as he was looking around, he heard a small voice. "Fellow Taoist, do you need spirit pills?" Lu Yi followed the voice, and saw a woman sitting in front of a stall. Her face was slightly red, and she pursed her lips, as if she had mustered up her courage to ask him. Lu Yi glanced at her, and saw a dozen jade bottles on the stall in front of her. They were probably filled with all kinds of spirit pills. Why would he need any spirit pills? Recently, he had been suppressing his cultivation, and did not actively cultivate. He was afraid that his cultivation would rise too quickly, and affect his foundation. He did not want to pay attention to her, but when he met her eyes, he could not help but squat down. There was nothing special about her eyes, but it reminded him of his predicament when he first came to the Myriad Elephant Island. He could tell that this woman did not have a good background, or else she would not have set up a stall here to sell spirit pills. It was not easy to sell such things in the scattered market. After all, they had to be ingested. Ordinary cultivators would go directly to the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce, or the shops on other spiritual islands to buy spirit pills. It was difficult for this woman to gain the trust of others by selling spirit pills here. If she bought a low-quality spirit pill and consumed it in a battle, it would be easy to cause trouble. There were more than a dozen jade bottles, all of which were labeled with the name of each pill. Seeing Lu Yi squat down, the woman quickly adjusted her expression and said, "Fellow Taoist, take a look at what you want. I have ordinary spirit pills here." Lu Yi picked up a bottle of spirit recovery pills. These were the most common spirit pills, used by constellation cultivators, to replenish their spirit energy and cultivate. They were in high demand, and almost everyone needed them. They were also the most basic spirit pills in the constellation realm. "Are you a medical cultivator?" Lu Yi asked casually, mainly because he felt a familiar aura from the woman. It was very gentle, as if as long as he was by her side, he would be able to relax. Shui Yuan and Wuxia both had such auras. Lu Yi also smelled a faint fragrance. It was the smell of flowers, but he couldn't tell what kind of flowers they were. "Yes." The woman nodded. "It's not easy for you either." Generally speaking, medical cultivators roamed the starry sky with companions. After all, relatively speaking, medical cultivators didn't have many means to deal with danger, so it was very easy for them to encounter danger. It was rare to see someone like this woman who was all alone. The woman tilted her head and looked at him, clearly not understanding what he meant. "How much?" Lu Yi asked. The woman quoted a price. Lu Yi raised his eyes to look at her. "Your price is even higher than Vientiane Chamber of Commerce's." No wonder no one was interested in the woman's stall. She was selling spirit pills, and the price was very expensive. It would be strange if someone would buy it. The woman explained, "The quality of the pills I refine is very good. If you don't believe me, just buy a bottle and you'll know." Lu Yi said, "If I buy them and the quality isn't good, can I still ask you for a refund?" The woman's expression became serious. "The quality is absolutely guaranteed. I refine them myself, so I know. So what if you know?" Lu Yi cursed in his heart. This woman's personality wasn't suitable for doing business here. She was far worse than Anja. "I'll take all of them." Lu Yi put down the jade bottle in his hand. "Huh." The woman was stunned. "I said, how many spirit pills do you have?" "I'll take all of them." Lu Yi looked at her. It wasn't easy to be alone outside. He thought about how sad it would be if his second senior sister, or Wuxia, set up a stall here, but no one showed any interest. However, his second senior sister and Wuxia weren't ordinary medical cultivators, so they most likely wouldn't do such a thing. The woman came to her senses, and was overjoyed. "Is what you said true?" She had set up a stall here for several days, but the number of spirit pills she sold could be counted on one hand. When people passed by here, they didn't stop at all. She didn't expect that someone would buy all of them. "If you think I'm lying to you, I'll leave right now." Don't go, don't go," the woman said as she hurriedly took out bottle after bottle of spirit pills from her storage ring. She didn't stop until she took out more than 30 bottles. She looked at Lu Yi cautiously. "Brother, isn't this too much? Calculate the bill," Lu Yi urged. The woman happily calculated the bill. In the end, she gave Lu Yi a number, which was less than 3,000 spirit jades. Lu Yi paid her without hesitation. He put away all the spirit pills. As he left, the woman kept thanking him. After walking for a while, he took out a bottle of spirit recovery pills and threw one into his mouth. Then, he observed the talent tree's reaction. Other cultivators didn't dare to take spirit pills casually, but Lu Yi didn't care. With the talent tree, even if there was something wrong with the spirit pill, it wouldn't cause any harm to him. A moment later, Lu Yi revealed a surprised expression. Although the woman had vowed that the quality of the spirit pills she refined was better than the ones sold by the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce, there was no proof. Even if a cultivator swallowed these spirit pills, it would be difficult to tell the difference. However, Lu Yi was different. By observing the changes in the talent tree, he could directly see the quality of the spirit pills. The more impurities there were, the worse the quality, and vice versa. At this moment, the talent tree's reaction was very slight. Just as the woman had said, the quality of the spirit pills she refined was very good. Lu Yi looked back, but the woman had already disappeared. He guessed that she had left after selling all the spirit pills. Lu Yi felt it was a bit strange. With such alchemy skills, the woman could easily join a force and become their exclusive alchemist. She wouldn't have to work so hard to set up a stall here. Even the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce wouldn't refuse such a talent. However, she would rather work hard and set up her stall than join a force. Lu Yi guessed that the woman didn't like to be tied down. After strolling around the market for a while, Lu Yi headed towards the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce. In less than half a day, the auction would begin. At this moment, it was time for the participating cultivators to enter. The entrance was inside the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce. Many cultivators were waiting in line to enter, but Lu Yi directly went in another direction. There was another entrance. When Lu Yi arrived, he took out the D9 token he had obtained during the capital verification. Someone immediately respectfully took it and led him inside. Chao Xiang had told him that the minimum requirement for the capital verification was 100,000 spirit jades. In other words, only 100,000 spirit jades could qualify to participate in the auction. Of course, if he wanted to get better treatment, he would have to show more capital. Lu Yi had shown 10 million spirit jades, so his treatment was indeed different from ordinary cultivators. Under the guidance of the cultivator, he soon arrived at a room with the words D9 on it. The Chamber of Commerce cultivator stood at the door and gestured with his hand. "Honored guest, please come in. When the auction starts, if there's anything you like, you only need to bid inside. You'll be able to see it from the outside. If you win the auction, we'll be responsible for delivering it to you." Lu Yi nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. After entering room D9, Lu Yi immediately saw a huge transparent mirror. He didn't know what it was made of. Standing in front of the mirror, he could overlook the entire auction venue. It was an excellent view. Looking around, there were many rooms similar to his. However, from this angle, the mirror was filled with mist, making it impossible to see what was going on inside. Lu Yi tried to use his divine sense, but it was still blocked. He was sure that they were looking at him in the same way. The room's furnishings were very simple. There was only a huge chair and a round table next to it. There were several plates of fresh spirit fruits on the table. In addition, there was also a jug of fine wine. On the armrest of the chair, there was a protruding object. Lu Yi sat on the chair and studied it for a moment. He knew that this object was used to bid during the auction. At this moment, a large number of cultivators were entering the auction venue one after another. They were looking for seats based on the tokens they had obtained. There were also cultivators from the Chamber of Commerce standing around to guide them. Therefore, although there were many people entering the auction venue, there was no chaos at all. Everything was done in an orderly manner. There was still a while before the auction began. Lu Yi sat on the chair and casually picked up a spirit fruit and took a bite. He didn't know what spirit fruit it was, but it was very sweet and contained good spirit qi. He could refine it into his own spirit qi. By the time Lu Yi had eaten most of the spirit fruits, the auction venue was already filled with people. This was the result after the verification of the spirit stones. One could imagine how lively the scene would be if the verification of the spirit stones had not been carried out. Lu Yi roughly estimated that there were at least 3,000 cultivators participating in the auction this time. In the vast Wanxiang Sea, there were still many rich cultivators. Of course, most of them were still struggling at the bottom. At a certain moment, the originally bright auction venue suddenly darkened. Then, a beam of light shone in from somewhere and hit the high platform at the front. When the beam of light lit up, an old man with white hair and a beard had appeared at that position. His eyebrows were lowered, and his hands were tucked into his sleeves. He stood there in a relaxed manner, but the powerful aura emanating from his body indicated that he was a genuine Yu Yao. Moreover, he was a late-stage Yu Yao cultivator. The originally noisy auction venue suddenly fell silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on the old man. The old man spoke slowly. His voice was not loud, but it rang in everyone's ears. I am Yu Xiuzhai, the 9th steward of the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. I will be hosting this auction. Chapter 1495. When Yu Xiuzhai's voice fell, the auction venue went into an uproar. There were many stewards in the myriad elephant chamber of commerce. For example, Chao Xiang, who Lu Yi often met, was a steward in the chamber of commerce. However, he was only responsible for receiving guests and making transactions with them, which was very different from a steward like Yu Xiuzhai. Someone like Yu Xiuzhai had a high position in the myriad elephant chamber of commerce and wouldn't easily appear in public. No one expected him to host this auction. Many people realized that there would be a lot of rare and good things in this auction. Otherwise, a master like Yu Xiuzhai wouldn't have come out. On the high platform, Yu Xiuzhai didn't speak any nonsense. After introducing himself, he gestured to the side. Another beam of light shone down from an unknown place. Shrouded in the light, a tall woman walked out from the side with a plate in her hands and stood beside Yu Xiuzhai. There was a red cloth covering the plate. Yu Xiuzhai raised his hand to remove it and slowly said, 30 bottles of top-quality spirit recovery pills. If any fellow Taoist wants them, you can bid. No reserve price. After a moment of silence, the hall was immediately filled with the sound of bidding. Lu Yi found that even some of the people in the private rooms were very interested in this top-grade spirit-restoring pill. The quality of spirit pills was divided into good and bad. Different alchemists would refine different spirit pills of different quality. Even the same alchemists couldn't guarantee that the quality of their spirit pills would be the same. Needless to say, waste pills were the result of broken refinement and had no value. Finished spirit pills were divided into 4 grades: low, middle, high, and top quality. The higher the grade, the less impurities there would be in the spirit pill. For example, the spirit pills Lu Yi bought in the marketplace had very few impurities and were basically at the level of high-quality spirit pills. Such spirit pills naturally had little harm to cultivators, because there were very few pill toxins in them. The impurities in top-quality spirit pills were almost negligible. In theory, there wouldn't be too many hidden dangers if a cultivator were to consume them. As a result, a cultivator's cultivation efficiency would greatly increase with the help of top-quality spirit pills. However, no matter which chamber of commerce it was, top-grade spirit pills were hard to come by. The birth of this kind of spirit pill was basically not under the control of an alchemist. Basically, only when an alchemist was lucky enough to refine 1 or 2 spirit pills would they be able to produce. Even for the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce, taking out 30 bottles in one go would require a period of time to accumulate them. Such an item was undoubtedly qualified to be the first item of the auction. Moreover, everyone needed Spirit Dawn, so it was easy to stir up the atmosphere of the auction. If Lu Yi didn't have the talent tree, he would definitely be very interested in these spirit pills. However, with the talent tree, no matter how high the quality of these spirit pills was, they weren't very attractive to him. After a round of bidding, many people backed out. It wasn't until the time it took to brew a cup of tea that a person from room C4 won the bid, and the price far exceeded the normal purchase price. After the auction ended, the woman holding the plate withdrew. Another woman ascended the stage, also holding a plate. However, instead of a jade bottle, the plate contained a short arrow. It looked very strange. Yu Xiuzhai said, "The Heaven Splitter arrow is a rare treasure. Although it is a spirit artifact, its power is not inferior to a 3-star transcendent artifact's attack. The starting bid is 100,000 spirit jades. Fellow Taoists, please make your bids." Lu Yi couldn't help but feel a bit tempted. Although the Heaven Splitter arrow was very far away from him, and he couldn't see it clearly, nor could he use it to feel its power, the Vientiane Chamber of Commerce wouldn't cheat in this regard. Since Yu Xiuzhai said that its power was not inferior to a 3-star transcendent artifact's attack, then it had to be true. Lu Ye's current strength was in a rather awkward state. He could be said to be invincible in the constellation realm, but he was still lacking when it came to Yu Yao. This was mainly due to the difference in cultivation levels. Although the 10,000 tidal waves could allow him to barely put up a fight against an ordinary Yu Yao, in a true battle of life and death, he definitely wasn't a match for any Yu Yao. He still had the red talisman that Su Yuqing had given him. That thing was a great killing tool, but it could only be used once. If there was any method or treasure that could deal with Yu Yao, he naturally didn't want to miss it. He raised his hand and pressed it against the protruding object on the armrest of his chair. His divine sense surged, and he made a bid. However, he had clearly underestimated the popularity of a rare treasure, like the Heaven Splitter arrow among cultivators. This was only the second auction item, and the entire auction house was already in a frenzy. All kinds of bids rose and fell, and there was almost no time for them to rest. Lu Yi made a few more bids, but they were all quickly surpassed by others. After a long while, Yu Xiuzhai suddenly looked towards Lu Ye's room and said, "Fellow Taoist in room D9 bids 1,300,000 spirit jades." Before he finished speaking, he looked towards another room and said, "Fellow Taoist in room A6 bids 1,320,000 spirit jades." It was only a spirit treasure, but it had actually been auctioned for such a high price. It was unimaginable because even if it was a magic weapon, that much spirit jades could buy a 5-star magic weapon. The power that the Heaven Splitter arrow could display was only equivalent to a single attack from a 3-star magic weapon. Moreover, it was a rare treasure, which meant that it could only be used once. In the end, it was because star constellations couldn't use the power of magic weapons. No matter how good a magic weapon was, it was useless if star constellations couldn't use their spirit chi. However, the Heaven Splitter arrow was different. It was something that star constellations could use. To star constellations, it was a life-saving treasure, so they naturally wouldn't complain about its price. This was also the reason why purple talismans were so expensive. In particular, purple talismans from the dwarf clan were definitely good things that everyone would fight over. As for red talismans, they were simply treasures that couldn't be obtained. After a few more rounds of bidding, Lu Yi finally won the Heaven Splitter arrow at the price of 1,800,000 spirit jades. It wasn't that the cultivator from room A6 didn't have as much wealth as he did. Those who could enter the side rooms had to fork out at least 10 million spirit jades to verify the price. However, they might have other things they wanted to buy, so they weren't willing to spend too much on the Heaven Splitter arrow. Thus, they could only give up helplessly. Another auction item was presented. Lu Yi glanced at it. It was a good item, but he wasn't very interested. Thus he waited quietly. After a while, someone knocked on the door and entered. They brought the Heaven Splitter arrow over, and Lu Yi paid the corresponding amount of spirit jades. He had also obtained a rare treasure like this when he was in the 9 provinces. However, although they were of the same type, the treasures of the 9 provinces naturally couldn't be compared to the Heaven Splitter arrow. Lu Yi was very satisfied as he toyed with the Heaven Splitter arrow in his hand. If he met Yu Yao again, this thing could more or less intimidate her to a certain extent. If he used it well, he might even be able to injure her. Therefore, although 1,800,000 spirit jades wasn't a small amount, he felt that it was worth it. As expected of the Myriad Elephant Commerce Hall's auction, Good items were endless. All kinds of secret techniques, cultivation methods, spirit pills, treasures, rare treasures and rare treasures were presented one after another. Lu Yi originally only wanted to bid for a piece of heavenly phoenix blue crystal. However, halfway through the auction, he had already bid for several items. Some were things he wanted, while others were things he felt were suitable for Wuxia, second senior sister, and the others. He was prepared to give them to them when he had the opportunity to return to the 9 provinces. He hadn't even seen the heavenly phoenix blue crystal yet, but he had already spent nearly 10 million spirit jades. Lu Yi realized that something was wrong. He only had 50 million spirit jades in total. After spending 10 million spirit jades, he only had 40 million spirit jades left. Although this amount of spirit jades should be enough to buy a piece of heavenly phoenix blue crystal, he still had to be cautious. He couldn't participate in any more auctions. No matter how good the items were, he couldn't. Lu Yi secretly made up his mind. On the high platform, Yu Xiuzhai was still standing there in a relaxed manner. Another auction item appeared on the stage. As soon as this auction item appeared, many people revealed curious expressions. It was actually a cage. Many people looked at it with puzzlement. Lu Yi was also looking at it. Soon, he revealed a look of surprise because he vaguely felt that there was something inside the cage, but also that there wasn't. The cage was undoubtedly a treasure. After it was pushed up by the Myriad Elephant Commerce Hall's maidservant, Yu Xiuzhai didn't say anything. He just casually patted the cage. Magic power surged and the cage flashed. A figure suddenly appeared in the cage. The figure seemed to have been in the cage the whole time, but no one had seen it before. The venue was suddenly in an uproar. Everyone's eyes were focused on the figure. Lu Yi was also looking. As he looked, he revealed an extremely surprised expression because he found that the person in the cage gave him a very familiar feeling. This kind of familiarity didn't mean that he knew the person or anything, but that he had encountered this type of person before. The figure in the cage was definitely not a human, nor was it a concealment method. If the other party had been in a concealed state just now, Lu Yi should have been able to see some clues. Judging from the figure, the other party seemed to be a woman, but her long hair draped over her shoulders and covered her cheeks, making it impossible to see her appearance. Through the gaps between the scattered hair, Lu Yi could see a pair of eyes filled with hatred and hatred. These eyes were filled with blood and tears as they stared fiercely at Yu Xiuzhai, as if they wanted to devour him. Lu Yi frowned. Although he had long heard that the Myriad Elephant Commerce Hall's auction would occasionally have some rare races appear, he didn't expect to see one this time. He didn't know what race this was, but since it could be placed in the auction, it must be a very rare and precious race. For example, if the monster race and the mermaid race appeared in the auction at this moment, it would inevitably arouse the interest of many people. Yu Xiuzhai said, "The soul race." A powerful master captured her somewhere in the starry sky and entrusted her to the Myriad Elephant Commerce Hall to auction. There is no reserve price. If any fellow Taoist is interested, you may bid. Lu Yi was surprised. The soul race. It was actually the soul race. Just like the Fey race and the mermaid race under the 10,000 Elephant Sea that Lu Yi had come into contact with, the soul race was also an extremely rare and precious race in the starry skies. Such races all had a common characteristic, which was that they had their own unique racial talents that could bring great benefits to cultivators. It was also because of this that many cultivators coveted them. End of chapter. Chapter 1496. The fairy race's blessing was undoubtedly a very powerful racial talent. All kinds of strange blessings could directly increase a cultivator's strength. The merfolk race's singing was also similar. Moreover, the merfolk race's women were all beautiful. If one could get together with a pure merfolk race woman, they might even have a chance to obtain some kind of strange secret technique. The soul race did not have blessings or singing, but they could possess souls. The bodies of this strange race were very strange. They seemed to be illusory and real, just like ghosts. That was why they were called the soul race. Regardless of whether they were male or female, they had a strange ability. They could use the soul possession technique and the cultivator, who was possessed by the soul possession technique, would have their strength increased. Lu Yi had once seen information about the soul race in the records of the dwarf race's Rest Abyss Pavilion. At that time, he had an idea because there was a group of martyrs in the 9 states who had long lost their bodies but were still alive. The 9 states had now been promoted to a large realm, but this group of martyrs, who had once made great contributions to the 9 states, were still trapped in the immortal origin city. They could not escape for the rest of their lives, and could not even grow. The sacrifices of the ancestors should not be forgotten. The current 9 states was no longer the 9 states of the past. They should be treated better. Lu Yi had thought that if he encountered the soul race after excellence, he might be able to get in touch with them, and see if he could ask them for advice on how the soul race cultivated and became stronger. Unfortunately, he had never encountered the soul race. It was only later that he found out that this race was very rare. Moreover, because of their racial talent, they were coveted by the cultivators of various major races. Therefore, they basically did not appear in front of outsiders. He did not expect that a soul race would appear at this auction. Lu Yi immediately knew that he could choose not to participate in the auction of the other items, but he had to obtain this soul race. If he missed this opportunity, it would not be so easy for him to encounter the soul race again. Therefore, as soon as Yu Xiuzhai finished speaking, he did not hesitate to bid. At the same time, in room A6, a young man looked at the soul race with shining eyes and said excitedly, "The news is correct. There really is a soul race at this auction." He turned to look at a middle-aged man next to him. "Second uncle, we must get this soul race. If we can use her as a soul to forge the armor, its power will definitely increase greatly. At that time, even if we encounter Yu Yao, I will have the ability to escape." The middle-aged man nodded slightly and was about to bid. At this moment, Yu Xiuzhai opened his mouth from the high platform. Fellow Taoist in room D9 bids 5 million spirit jades. Many of the cultivators in the auction hall revealed looks of envy. They felt that number D9 was truly rich. Previously, he had already auctioned off several items with a total value of over 10 million gold coins. This time, however, he had bid 5 million gold coins. It was as though he was determined to win this auction. In room A6, the young man said angrily, "It's this guy again." Previously, he also wanted the sky splitter arrow, but it was snatched away by the other party. Now the other party actually wanted to snatch the soul from him. It was really infuriating. "Second uncle, we can't lose to him this time." Previously, he did not compete with the other party for the heaven splitter arrow, because he was waiting for this soul race. Moreover, the price of the heaven splitter arrow back then was indeed on the high side. This time he definitely could not give up. The middle-aged man didn't say anything. He just quietly made a bid. On the high platform, Yu Xiuzhai immediately turned to look at them. Room A6 bids 5.01 million. Immediately after, a few more parties bid. Lu Yi kept following. In a short while, the price had already exceeded 8 million gold coins. After a while, the price had exceeded 10 million gold coins. At this time, there were not many people bidding, including Lu Yi and room A6. Only room B7 was bidding. When the price approached 20 million gold coins, room B7 also stopped bidding. Obviously, they felt that the price was a little too high, or had exceeded their ability to bear. However, this was only a small portion. In this regard, Lu Yi undoubtedly had an advantage. He was alone, and did not need to consider anything else. The young man from room A6 sweated a little, because he realized that he had somewhat underestimated the capital of room D9. 20 million spirit jades had already exceeded their expectations. It was undoubtedly unwise to continue bidding. However, this was an excellent opportunity. It would be a pity to miss it. He couldn't help but ask, "Second uncle, why don't we add more at once and make him back off?" The middle-aged man only added 10,000 spirit jades each time. His unhurried manner made the young man feel very uncomfortable. The middle-aged man shook his head. "You don't understand. Increasing the price like this will put pressure on the other party. No matter how much he bids, we'll only add 10,000 spirit jades to tell him that we are determined to obtain this soul race." The young man nodded in understanding. Second uncle is wise. In the auction hall, the participating cultivators felt that their horizons had been broadened. It was rare to see two factions fighting to the death with spirit jades. To be honest, not only were they surprised, but even Yu Xiaozhai was surprised. This was because in the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce's estimation, the soul race could only be auctioned for 20 million spirit jades at most. After all, no matter how great her value was, there was a limit. However, the current situation was not over. The price was already heading for 30 million. After a while, the price really broke through 30 million gold coins. This time, not only was the young man sweating, but even the middle-aged man's expression became solemn. He really couldn't understand which faction was chasing the price so tightly. It was already 30 million, yet they still hadn't given up. He was increasing the price by 10,000 spirit jades, but the other party was even more ruthless. They directly increased the price by 1,000,000 spirit jades. They were even more imposing than him. Moreover, each time they followed the price, there was no hesitation at all. He pondered for a moment, then he activated his magic power and said, "Fellow Taoist, this soul race is very important to my Wufang Island. I don't know if fellow Taoist is willing to part with this treasure. If fellow Taoist is willing." However, he also knew that he had broken the rules. After all, this was an auction. How could there be such a discussion? However, he was indeed almost at his limit. It was obviously too late to transfer spirit jades from Wufang Island now. The price of the soul race finally settled at 32 million. Room A6 didn't bid anymore. In room D9, the corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Just now, he had made up his mind that no matter how many good things there were in the auction, he wouldn't participate in the bidding. He didn't expect that there would be such a big one. He checked his spirit jades. After deducting the amount that he had to hand over later, he only had 8 million left. However, if he could find a way to solve the problem of those martyrs from this soul race, and get them out of the rut of the immortal essence city, it would be worth it no matter how many spirit jades he had to pay. Fortunately, he still had some spirit crystals. If these spirit crystals were converted into spirit jades, they should be worth about 10 million. It was enough to get the Sky Phoenix blue crystal, according to the market price that Lu Yi had inquired before. Although the Sky Phoenix blue crystal was precious, it was at most a few million spirit jades. It would never exceed 10 million. The auction continued. After a while, the people of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce sent the cage over. A jade token was also sent over. Lu Yi only learned what the jade token was used for after that person explained it to him. Not only was the Soul Clan member locked in a cage, but she was also implanted with a special restriction. This jade token was the item that could control that restriction. The people of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce were thoughtful. They knew that the soul race was captured and put up for auction. She was resentful and wouldn't listen to others easily. Therefore, they planted a restriction in advance to make it easier for the winning cultivator to control her. Lu Yi directly opened the cage and looked through the spirit runes. He saw the soul race walk out of the cage and stand still in the corner. She didn't make a sound and had no intention of escaping. She was obviously not stupid. She knew that she couldn't escape in this place, so she didn't do anything useless. After thinking about it, Lu Yi spoke. "I have no malice toward you. I just have something I need your help with. I still have something to auction. Once the auction is over, I'll take you away." He didn't know if the soul race believed him. In any case, Lu Yi didn't seem to care, but he was actually vigilant. The soul race's movements were very difficult to detect. If she sneak attacked him here, he might not be able to dodge. A moment later, the Sky Phoenix blue crystal that Lu Yi had been waiting for finally appeared. From the outside, it looked like a crystal the size of a fist. There didn't seem to be anything special about it, but it was one of the treasures that weapon cultivators wanted the most in the late constellation realm. The starting price was 800,000, and Lu Yi immediately began to bid. He had just been reprimanded by Yu Xiaozhai, but Yu Xiaozhai's cultivation was higher than his. He was older than him, and his status was nobler than his. He couldn't bear a grudge, and could only blame it all on Lu Yi. Previously, Lu Yi had snatched the Heaven Splitter arrow and the soul race. Now that Lu Yi was interested in the Sky Phoenix blue crystal, he naturally had to raise the price to vent his anger. The cultivators in the auction venue saw another bizarre scene. House A6 and House D9 once again began a bloody battle for spirit jades. The Sky Phoenix blue crystal, which was originally worth a few million at most, was raised to nearly 20 million during the battle between these two fellows. It was really surprising. However, the results were different from the previous two times. When House A6 called out the price of 20 million, House D9 didn't make any more moves. Thus, everyone knew that Branch A6 had won in this confrontation. Chapter 1497. In room D9, Lu Yi stood up expressionlessly, pushed open the door and said, "Come with me." There would definitely be a lot of good things after the auction, but there was no need to stay after missing out on the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. He could feel that room A6 was targeting him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have raised the price so high. 20 million spirit jades had far exceeded the value of the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. Lu Yi only had 8 million spirit jades now. Even if he had more, he wouldn't bid for it. Without the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal, he could choose other treasures to replace it. However, if he did that, the Mountain Pan Saber's grade would be slightly lower. He wasn't in a hurry to upgrade Yu Yao. He might have another chance to find the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal in the future, so he didn't need it too urgently. He didn't get what he wanted, but he gained a lot from those he wasn't prepared to bid for, especially the soul race. He hadn't expected this at all. He could feel that the soul race was behind him, but they moved silently and were invisible. If Lu Yi didn't have a jade token that could control them, they would have fled long ago. After leaving the Myriad Elephant trading firm, Lu Yi summoned the star boat. He waited until he was sure that the soul race had boarded before he left. Standing on the star boat, Lu Yi felt a chill run down his spine, as if a venomous snake was licking his neck with its forked tongue. Clearly, the chill came from the soul's gaze. If the woman wanted to escape, she had to snatch the token. Otherwise, with the token in Lu Ye's hand, she would never be able to escape. "If you want to fight, you can try." Lu Ye's indifferent voice came from the front. A strange light flashed in the eyes of the formless soul race. Then, without hesitation, she pounced forward and merged with Lu Ye's body. Lu Ye's eyes were downcast. As he drove the star boat toward Matchless Island, he divided his attention. His soul avatar appeared in his divine sea. Lu Yi had acquired the soul-suppressing pagoda back when he was still in the 9 states. But as his cultivation grew, the soul-suppressing pagoda became less and less useful. The soul-suppressing pagoda was a treasure from the realm of soul. So no matter how good it was, it had its limits. It couldn't keep up with the growth of Lu Ye's strength, but it still had its uses. At this moment, Lu Ye's soul avatar was standing at the top of the tower, looking down. Unlike in the outside world, inside the divine sea, the figure of the woman was completely revealed. She was a very tall woman with long hair that reached her ankles. She was coldly looking in Lu Ye's direction. Generally speaking, if a cultivator wanted to invade someone else's spirit sea, they would have to use some special methods, or have the power of their spirit sea reach a crushing level. However, the soul race did not need to do so. This race was named after the soul, and they had extremely special methods in terms of the power of the soul. As long as the difference in cultivation was not too great, they could casually invade the divine sea of others. This was also the most common method that the soul race used to fight with others. Compared to ordinary battles, this method was undoubtedly much more dangerous. The soul race had no enmity with Lu Yi, but no one was willing to be suppressed by others and lose their freedom. If she wanted to escape, she would have to deal with Lu Yi. The moment their eyes met, the woman suddenly raised her hands and formed a seal in front of her. Immediately after, the calm divine sea began to ripple outwards with the woman as the center. This was the result of the soul-suppressing pagoda guarding the divine sea. If it weren't for the soul-suppressing pagoda, the divine sea would have been filled with monstrous waves. If this had really happened, Lu Ye's soul would have been shaken and his mind would have been uneasy. Lu Yi simply looked at her quietly, not showing any intention of stopping her. This was because for him, Stopping this soul race was actually very simple. He just needed to take out the token he obtained at the auction and pour his spirit force into it to activate the seal on the woman's body. Then he could expel her from his divine sea. However, Lu Yi didn't want to be remembered by her in the future. Before he could find a suitable method to deal with her, they would have to spend some time together. As the saying went, one could be a thief for 1,000 days, but there was no such thing as guarding against a thief for 1,000 days. Lu Yi wanted to let this soul race woman know that her methods wouldn't work on him, and put an end to any devious ideas she might have. The records he had seen in the little human race's resting abyss pavilion weren't comprehensive. Lu Yi only knew that the soul race had a special method to invade another's divine sea, but he didn't know that the soul race could borrow the strength of another's divine sea to deal with the master of the divine sea. As the woman displayed her methods, Lu Yi could clearly feel that a portion of the strength in his divine sea was being controlled by her. This was truly strange. It had to be known that this strength was clearly his. The soul race was truly a strange race. With such a strange strength, any cultivator that had their divine sea invaded would likely not have a good ending. Arrows suddenly swept out from the waves, blotting out the sky as they shot towards Lu Ye's soul avatar. Each arrow was formed from Lu Ye's own spiritual energy. Lu Ye's heart stirred. The soul-suppressing pagoda beneath his feet suddenly rose up, enveloping him and turning into a protective barrier. Do. The arrows formed from spiritual energy bombarded the soul-suppressing pagoda, causing it to sway uncontrollably. Lu Yi was now a late-stage star constellation realm cultivator, so his spiritual energy was extremely powerful. Even the soul-suppressing pagoda wouldn't be able to withstand this level of attack for long. Release my restrictions and I'll leave. The woman urged her strength to attack as she spoke. She could see that the soul-suppressing pagoda wasn't of high quality and wouldn't be able to last for too long. However, what made her a little curious was why this human didn't try to stop her. He clearly only needed to activate the power of the token to stop her. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. His silent refusal made his stance clear. The soul-suppressing pagoda might not be able to hold on, but he still had other methods. With a thought, his divine sea boiled and a starship suddenly appeared, as if it was riding the wind and waves of an extremely harsh sea. The battleship seemed to have gone through an extremely cruel battle. The entire hull was tattered, but as it slowly revealed itself, and Lu Ye's spiritual energy poured into it, the battleship quickly became intact. Then, one figure after another appeared on the battleship, and quickly took up their respective roles. Lu Yi stood on the deck of the starship, staring expressionlessly at the Spiritas woman. All the methods she used were blocked by the starship's protective barrier. The Spiritas woman's eyes narrowed as she stared incredulously at the starship that had suddenly appeared. Even with her knowledge and experience, she couldn't tell what this soul artifact was. There was actually a soul artifact that looked like a starship in this world? In the next moment, her body suddenly tensed up because there was a great danger shrouding her. She could clearly feel that there was an extremely surging power brewing in the battleship, and the aura of that power had firmly locked onto her. It was as if there was a sharp sword hanging above her head that could fall at any time. Stop fooling around and get out. Lu Yi looked at her, his tone flat, as if he was driving away a playful child. The churning waves around the woman slowly calmed down, and her expression became bitter. She finally understood why this human didn't use the power of the token to restrain her. With such a soul artifact guarding his divine sea, even if she was a Spiritus, she couldn't do anything to him. If she didn't know when to stop, she would be the one to suffer. After weighing the pros and cons, the woman finally withdrew from Lu Ye's divine sea. Lu Yi sped all the way back to Matchless Island and drove the star boat straight through the island's protective barrier. Today, the overall strength of Matchless Island was incomparable to the time when Carp Island attacked. Just in the late constellation realm alone, Matchless Island had recruited no less than 13 people. Including the early and middle constellation realm, the number of people recruited by Matchless Island in the recent period of time had almost reached 100. With such a force in Tangjun, it was more than enough to defend Matchless Island. so there weren't any forces foolish enough to cause trouble for them recently. It could be said that with Matchless Island's current strength, even if 2 or 3 forces like Carp Island joined forces, they might not be able to take them down. Those cultivators who were lucky enough to join Matchless Island, through the Zhongzheng Shu's inquiry, were naturally impeccable. Moreover, because Matchless Island was a spirit island, they could save a lot of spirit jades by cultivating here. Therefore, even if they didn't have much monthly salary, these cultivators were still willing to stay. What made these cultivators even more excited was that they could clearly feel that the starry sky energy in Matchless Island was continuously increasing. Right now, Matchless Island was only a middle-grade spirit island. But who could be sure that it wouldn't become a high-grade spirit island if it continued to increase like this? Under such expectations, the cultivators who joined the Peerless Island cherished this opportunity very much. Unconsciously, they had a sense of belonging and identity to the Peerless Island. In such a situation, even if a strong enemy attacked, they would not casually flee. Even if it was for their own future, they would still advance and retreat with Chu Shun. Recently, Chu Shun was looking for a way to make money. If a spirit island wanted to continue to develop, they would need to invest a lot of spirit jades in the early stages. Needless to say, the Matchless Island had spent 4 million spirit jades to build the defensive array. This was not a small sum, so they had to find a way to recoup this investment no matter what. Moreover, in the future, the cultivators of Matchless Island would need spirit jades for their cultivation. They couldn't just rely on the starry sky energy on the island. Therefore, they had to find a suitable way to make money. Only then could they stabilize the hearts of the people and retain the talents. The best way was to open various shops on the island to attract cultivators to trade. This was also the main source of income for most spirit islands. However, it was still too early for Peerless Island to consider this. If they forced it, it would be very difficult to gather popularity if they did not have any particularly attractive goods. Chu Shun had been worried about this for a period of time, but he could not think of a good solution. Only now did he realize how naive he was when he wanted to create his own faction. Chapter 1498. Chu Shun pondered for a while. If he wanted to solve this problem, he would have to trouble Sbhynx Lauda. He had come to look for Lu Yi once before, but to no avail. Now that he saw Lu Ye's starboat returning, he hurried over. Lu Yi had just returned to his cave. Before he could even sit down, the restriction at the cave entrance was triggered. He opened it and saw Chu Shun walking in. Looking over, Chu Shun was taken aback. Other than Lu Yi, there was also a tall and slender woman with an icy temperament. Lu Yi did not know why this woman from the Soul Tribe was willing to show herself. However, she did not look any different from a human, provided that she did not use any of the special techniques of the Soul Tribe. If she was willing to do so, Lu Yi could not control her. At this moment, Lu Yi was sitting upright while the woman from the Soul Tribe stood quietly at the side like a servant. Chu Shun obviously misunderstood something. He looked at Lu Yi with admiration. Sbhynx Lauda was indeed Sbhynx Lauda. Even a woman with such beauty and figure was willing to serve him. He was truly a role model. However, he did not know the relationship between Lu Yi and this woman from the Soul Tribe. He did not dare to ask, and only greeted Lu Yi. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi asked. Chu Shun sat in front of Lu Yi and briefly explained the predicament of the Peerless Island. Lu Yi said, "If a faction wants to survive on the myriad phenomenon sea, they should have their own way of making money." There was no need to talk about the top-grade spiritual islands with spirit jade mines. Below the top-grade spiritual islands, no matter if they were high-grade, mid-grade, or low-grade spiritual islands, without a certain way of making money, they would not be able to survive here. Which cultivator did not need spirit jade for cultivation? "What are your plans?" Lu Yi asked. Chu Shun must have some considerations for coming to find him at this time. Chu Shun straightened his face and said, "Senior brother, this is what I think. We don't have any special skills, so we can't help people refine pills or forge weapons. Other than doing some escort missions to earn spirit jade, we can only cooperate with other factions." The escort mission he mentioned was a very common thing in the Wanxiang Sea. For example, when Anja and Lu Yi had traded a large number of dragon breath crystals and wanted to return to their domain, it was not safe for Anja to rush to the insect path from the Wanxiang Sea with so many spirit jades on him. So he had to recruit some people to protect him along the way. As long as he could return to his domain through the insect path, he would be safe. But if Anja wanted to find someone to escort him, he couldn't just randomly find someone. He had to find someone reliable and trustworthy. The Peerless Island now had the qualifications to do this, but the path hadn't been opened yet, and Chushin didn't plan to get involved. Firstly, the profit wasn't great, and secondly, the competition was fierce. The Peerless Island didn't have any advantage in this aspect, and thirdly, there weren't many people on the Peerless Island. Therefore, he felt that cooperating with other forces was the safest and fastest way. How? Chushin said. Let them set up shop on our spiritual island at a discounted price, or even free of charge. When there are profits, we will take a portion of the profits as repayment. 1 or 2 shops may not make much profit, but as long as there are enough shops, the profits will not be small. Lu Yi nodded. You want to turn Wushuang Island into a commercial spiritual island. That's what I think. What do you think, senior brother? Your idea is good, but there is a problem. Lu Yi looked at Chushin. How can you convince those factions to set up shop on our spiritual island? Even if you convince them, how can you guarantee the flow of customers? Without customers, it would be useless no matter how many shops there were. Of course, if there were enough shops to turn Wushuang Island into a commercial spiritual island, the flow of customers would not be low. By then, even if Chushin did not take the initiative to contact them, there would definitely be some factions who would be willing to talk to him. However, everything was difficult in the beginning. The first thing Wushuang Island had to do was to guarantee a certain flow of customers. Only then would the factions see the profits and be willing to set up shop here. The more shops there were, the more customers there would be. This was a snowball effect. Chushin said. So we need a special item that can attract many cultivators. It would be best if it could attract the interest of all the constellations and not be too expensive. Once Chushin said this, Lu Yi knew what he was thinking. He was obviously trying to create a unity array disk. Although it had been some time since the Constellation Hall auction ended, the various factions were studying the mysteries of the array disk. Many of them had made good progress. However, it was still very difficult to mass-produce the array disk. Other than the Island of Versatility, there were only a few top factions who were qualified to sell the array disk. Moreover, the number of array disks that these factions could sell was extremely limited, and the price was very high. If Wushuang Island took out the array disk at this time, it would definitely attract many cultivators. This way, the flow of customers would be guaranteed. Although the cultivators came here mainly for the array disk, they would definitely be willing to buy 1 or 2 items if they saw other items that they needed. After all, the distance between each spiritual island on the Island of Versatility was very far. As long as the price was not too different, no one would be willing to waste time to buy from other places. In the auction, the price of a single array disc was indeed not too expensive. If 3 to 5 cultivators worked together, it would not be difficult to buy one. Lu Yi remained silent. He was thinking that if he really did this, Wushuang Island would not be too peaceful. When that time came, it would definitely be lively with people coming and going. However, if he really succeeded, it would not be too bad. He was prepared to bring the cultivators of the 9 states to the Island of Versatility if he had the chance in the future. If there was a stable source of income, then the cultivators of the 9 states would not have to worry about not having enough spiritual jades when they came. The mermaid territory was his exclusive source of income. However, Lu Yi did not ask the mermaid territory for spiritual jades when he sent some spiritual pills there last time. He felt that compared to a business relationship, it was better to maintain a friendly relationship. The mermaid territory valued him very much. Last time, he even borrowed the power of the mermaid territory to deal with a mid-stage Yao. This was not something that could be measured by spiritual jades. Chushin looked at him nervously. He did not know what Lu Yi would decide in the end. After a long while, Lu Yi said, I can give you the array disc, but it is not suitable to sell it in large quantities. Otherwise, it will attract jealousy and hatred. You have to make a plan to ensure that not too many items are sold in a certain period of time. Senior brother, don't worry. I have considered this point. I will not lose the big picture for the small. I think that selling 3 to 5 spiritual jades a day is already good enough. Not only will it ensure a steady flow of customers, but it will also not attract the attention of those big forces. Lu Yi praised. If you can think of this, it means that you have seriously considered it. However, you must remember that a cultivator should still pay attention to their own cultivation. You are talented. Don't delay your own cultivation because of the Wuxia Island. Senior brother is right. I will remember. After receiving Lu Ye's approval, Chu Shen was very happy. He was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he talked with Lu Yi about the future development and plans of the Wuxia Island. It was obvious that he was very concerned about the Wuxia Island. It was no wonder. At his age, he was able to establish a force in a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Moreover, it was likely that the force would only grow stronger in the future. It was enough to be proud of. Half a day later, when Chu Shen was about to leave, Lu Yi suddenly said, "Send someone to the 10,000 Elephant Island. Find a woman selling spirit pills in the scattered market, and see if you can recruit her." If it was possible, the Wuxia Island could have its own store that sold spirit pills. The woman's alchemy skills were quite good. However, Lu Yi felt that there was not much hope. If someone with such skills wanted to rely on a force, they would have done so long ago. Why would they wander to the scattered market and set up a stall? Even so, Lu Yi still wanted Chu Shen to give it a try. Unfortunately, Lu Yi did not know the woman's name. Chu Shen asked about the woman's appearance and characteristics, then took a bottle of spirit pills from Lu Ye's hands before leaving. Lu Yi silently pondered for a moment. If the Wuxia Island could really develop according to Chu Shen's plan, its prospects would be very good. He increasingly felt that leaving Chu Shen on the Wuxia Island was a wise choice. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time and energy for him to take care of these things himself. Lu Yi turned to look at the Soul Clan woman and asked, "How should I address you?" The Spiritas woman glanced at him indifferently without any intention of speaking. If she hadn't spoken in his divine sea before, Lu Yi would have thought that she was mute, or that she couldn't understand his words. Lu Yi did not care about her attitude. If he were in her shoes, he would not have been able to act any better if he had been restricted by a restriction and had no freedom. However, it was impossible for Lu Yi to undo the restriction on her body. He had spent a total of 32 million spirit jades to purchase this soul clan in order to solve the problem of the martyrs of the 9 regions. Before solving this problem, even if she bore a grudge against him, Lu Yi had to tie her to his side. There was still time in the future, and they could slowly get along. Lu Yi believed that sincerity could move metal and stone. One day, he would be able to find a solution from this soul clan woman. Continuing to deduce the spirit patterns of the life origin technique, Lu Yi began to refine the twin chi-linked branch array disc. The following days were calm and peaceful. Lu Yi stayed in his cave. The Soul Clan woman had no intention of running away. Moreover, after experiencing the invasion of Lu Ye's divine sea, she had given up on any thoughts of attacking Lu Yi. This was because the Soul Clan's methods had no effect on Lu Yi, so there was no need for her to do something useless. During this period, Ghost kept contacting Lu Ye's doppelganger, saying that she wanted to go to the mermaid territory to cultivate with Bai Lu. Lu Yi was annoyed and arranged a time and place with Ghost through his doppelganger. After they met, he sent her over. Now the world was peaceful again. Unparalleled Island was undergoing construction again. Chu Shen had reorganized the entire Spirit Island and divided it into 2. One part of it would be the residence and cultivation place of the island's cultivators. This part would not be open to the public. The other part would be open to the public, and many shops would be built. Lu Yi did not participate in this. However, from the information that he occasionally obtained, Chu Shen's side was progressing well. He should have reached an agreement with many factions. Now, he was just waiting for the initial preparations to be completed before he could open for business. End of this chapter. Chapter 1499. If Chu Shun's plan could really be realized, then there would be no need to worry about the safety of Peerless Island in the future. At that time, there would definitely not be any blind forces that would come looking for trouble. This was because there would definitely be many industries on Peerless Island. In such an environment where the interests of various forces were intertwined, whoever dared to touch Peerless Island would be making an enemy of all the forces that had shops on Peerless Island. Therefore, in the long run, it was a very wise choice for Chu Shun to turn Peerless Island into a commercial spiritual island. The Soul Clan woman was still unwilling to communicate with Lu Yi. Ever since he brought her back from the auction on the Island of Versatility, Lu Yi didn't even know her name. However, this woman had no intention of escaping or resisting. Usually, when Lu Yi stayed in the cave, she would sit quietly by the side, not making a sound or disturbing him, like a puppet. Under persistent deduction, there was finally good progress in the life origin technique. With this as the foundation, a new spiritual inscription was born. However, the effect of this spiritual inscription was somewhat strange. Without personally trying it, Lu Yi couldn't figure out its mystery. Even Lu Yi himself couldn't figure out whether this spiritual inscription was useful or not. There were thousands of spiritual inscriptions in the world. Although some spiritual inscriptions could be formed stably and could be constructed, they were actually useless. This type of spiritual inscription was generally ineffective. If it wasn't complicated, it was mostly used for practice by spiritual inscriptionists. There was no suitable target to test it on, so Lu Yi could only put it aside for the time being. Fortunately, after this period of deduction, Lu Yi had some ideas on how to remove the life origin technique. As long as he could return to the 9 regions, he could try it. After choosing the next spiritual inscription to be deduced, Lu Yi continued. On this day, an uninvited guest suddenly came to the cave. Lu Yi looked at the Soul Clan woman sitting in front of him, who was curiously looking at him. He frowned and asked, "What's the matter?" Although everyone was on Wushuang Island, Lu Yi didn't have much interaction with Ban Ci. The only interaction they had before was when Ban Ci first came to greet him. Therefore, Lu Yi didn't know why she was looking for him. It was undeniable that Ban Ci was very strong. Not to mention other things, Lu Yi didn't understand the method she used to trap a cultivator from Yu Yao. He didn't even know how she did it. Although that kind of trap didn't last long, and Ban Ci paid a price for it, it was amazing that a constellation cultivator could do this. "I want to ask you a favor." Ban Ci retracted her gaze and said seriously, "I'm not free." Lu Yi flatly refused. They were not very familiar with each other. Moreover, according to Lu Yi and Chu Shun's speculation, Ban Ci should be secretly sent by Jiu Yin to protect Chu Shun. Even if such a person was not from the car bell industry, he must have a good background. What could he help with? What if I say I can give you a decent reward? Half Ci looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't lack spirit jades." He still had 8 million spirit jades, which was worth 10 million spirit crystals. It was enough for him in a short time. When Peerless Island was on the right track, and there were profits, he would still have income. At the very least, Chu Shun would give him the spirit jades from selling the twin breath connected branches array disc. "What about this?" Han Ci said as she flipped her hand, and an item appeared in her hand. Lu Yi looked over, and was slightly stunned because this thing looked very familiar to him. Moreover, he had seen a piece of it not too long ago. Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. This Phoenix Sky's blue crystal was bigger than the one he saw at the Island of Wonders auction. It was undoubtedly more valuable. Most importantly, this thing couldn't be bought with money. Lu Yi asked Chao Xiang to keep an eye on it for so long, but only one appeared at the last auction. Lu Yi didn't expect that after missing a piece of Phoenix Sky blue crystal at the auction, he would actually bring another piece to him. He was not tempted. Instead, he became vigilant. "How do you know I need the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal?" Ban Ci said matter-of-factly, "You're a weapon cultivator. Of course you need it." That was true. No weapon cultivator would not care about the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal when they were in the late constellation stage. However, Bansi was offering such a treasure as a reward. Clearly, her task was not simple. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi asked, "What do you want me to do?" If it was something else, Lu Yi wouldn't be tempted. However, Bansi's origins were mysterious and her methods were extraordinary. If even she needed help, it would be very troublesome. The Phoenix Sky's blue crystal was indeed good, but Lu Yi would not put himself in danger for it. "Accompany me to a place." Bansi's words were concise. "Tell me in detail." Lu Yi frowned. After hearing Bansi's explanation, Lu Yi finally understood what she wanted to do. She was in the late constellation stage and was preparing to become a Yu Yao. However, the biggest obstacle to becoming a Yu Yao was the conversion of one's spiritual power to magic power. This obstacle caused many constellation cultivators to stop at the threshold of becoming a Yu Yao. This conversion was very difficult to achieve by relying on a cultivator's own strength. Furthermore, it would take a very long time. Thus, cultivators would usually rely on external help during this process, such as spirit pills, miraculous medicines, or rare treasures. However, spirit pills and miraculous medicines that could convert a cultivator's spiritual power were extremely expensive. As for rare treasures, they could only be found by chance. The rewards from the constellation rankings were also a method. In terms of effectiveness, it was much better than any spirit pills or rare treasures. This was also the reason why many veteran constellation cultivators delayed their advancement and waited for the constellation hall to open. As long as they could leave their names on the rankings, they could borrow the power of the constellation hall to promote their Yu Yao. Bansi was preparing to go to a secret place. There was a power there that could help her speed up the conversion of her spiritual power. Thus, she needed a helper or a guard. This way, she could peacefully convert her spiritual power and not be disturbed by the outside world. After hearing Bansi's explanation, Lu Yi faintly felt that the matter was not so simple. If Bansi was really sent by Jiu Yan, she could have asked Jiu Yan for help if she wanted to convert her spiritual power. At that time, she could have just sent Yu Yao to accompany her. Why would she need to come to him and take out something like the heavenly phoenix blue crystal? Is that secret place dangerous? Lu Yi asked. Bansi knew what he was thinking and explained, "It's a little dangerous for me because I need to withstand the power of that secret place. If I can't withstand it, I will definitely suffer a backlash. However, it's not too dangerous for you. However, there might be others entering that place, so I need to ensure that I won't be disturbed while I'm refining my spiritual power. You can ask Yu Yao. I don't know Yu Yao, and I don't have anyone I can trust." Bansi looked at Lu Yi with clear eyes. Lu Yi stared at her expressionlessly, but he couldn't see any ripples in her eyes. Could it be that he and Chu Shun's speculations were wrong? Was she not sent by Jiu Yan? Thinking about it this way, if Bansi was really sent by Jiu Yan, she shouldn't have left at this time. She should have stayed by Chu Shun's side, but in fact she never did. She also didn't show any special care or concern for Chu Shun. "Why me?" Lu Yi asked. "You're strong enough. Puku is also strong enough. In terms of strength alone, Puku could be considered to be second to none in the constellation realm. Especially now, the cultivators that were ranked above him on the rankings had basically all entered the constellation hall to advance. Don't you know what kind of person Puku is?" Bansi glared at him angrily. Lu Yi didn't say anything. Of course he knew what kind of person Puku was. Although Bansi was petite, she had a good figure and good looks. Recently, Puku had probably chatted with her a lot. Of course, Bansi didn't want to choose Puku. "If you agree, when we come out of that secret place, this thing will be yours. If you don't, I can only think of another way." Chapter 1500. Yin Miao looked at Lu Yi with a smile. "I told you to come here often. It's been so long." Lu Yi blushed with shame. "I have some trivial matters to attend to. Please forgive me, Grand Elder." "What's the matter this time?" Yin Miao asked. Under normal circumstances, Lu Yi would not come here. Every time he came, it was for something. Lu Yi pointed at the soul woman beside him and explained the situation to Yin Miao. Yin Miao understood. "So you want her to stay here before you come back?" Grand Elder, if you don't like it, I can take her with me. Yin Miao said. There's nothing wrong with it. She can stay here. The soul race is not very common. They're a rare race in the universe, just like my race. Don't worry. I'll look after her personally. The soul woman's cultivation base was the same as Lu Ye's late constellation realm. Yin Miao had Yu Yao to look after her personally, so he was not afraid that she would cause any trouble. Lu Yi took out the token that controlled the soul race's restriction and handed it to Yin Miao. Then, he turned around and stepped into the door, returning to the desolate planet. He did not return to Peerless Island. Instead, he took out a sound talisman and sent a message to Chu Shun, explaining the situation. Then, he sent a message to Ban Si and arranged a meeting place with her. Lu Yi then left on his star boat. When he arrived at the meeting place, he did not see Ban Si. Lu Yi waited for half a day before he saw a beautiful and exquisite star boat flying over. Ban Si stood on the boat and waved at Lu Yi. Come up. Lu Yi leaped onto the boat and sat not far from Ban Si. The journey was not short, but with Ban Si driving the star boat, he did not need to worry too much. He only needed to deduce the spirit runes. Ban Si could not sit still. As they traveled, she asked, Fellow Taoist Li, I see that you're very strong. Why didn't you leave your name on the Constellation Hall ranking? Lu Yi did not even raise his head. Fellow Taoist, you're also quite strong. You didn't leave your name either. Ban Si smiled. My reasons are a little special. I couldn't participate in the Constellation Hall ranking competition and missed a good opportunity. Based on Ban Si's strength, if she really participated in the Constellation Hall ranking competition, it would be easy for her to enter the Constellation Hall. She did not need to go through so much trouble to promote Yu Yao. Right. Lu Yi replied indifferently. What a coincidence, me too. After a while he said, This time, many powerful people have appeared in the Constellation Hall. One of them is called Fa Wuzuan. I wonder if you've heard of him. I've heard of it. Lu Ye's expression didn't change as he casually replied. Rumor has it that this person had to leave the Constellation Hall midway. Otherwise, he might have been able to obtain first place in the rankings. What a pity. Lu Yi didn't know why Han Si would suddenly mention Fa Wuzun. Judging from Han Si's tone and demeanor, it was probably just a casual conversation. However, Lu Yi was Fa Wuzun. Han Si mentioning this name in front of him made him a little wary. It was unknown what he thought of, but Half Si suddenly smiled and said, Our island master has always said that Fa Wuzuan is his big brother. I don't know if I'll have the chance to meet this fellow Taoist and ask him for advice in the future. Lu Yi didn't say anything else. She kept saying half a sentence, but when she didn't get a response, she probably felt bored and stopped talking. The days of traveling were rather boring. It wasn't until a month later that a worm passage suddenly appeared in front of them. Only then did Lu Yi understand why the secret place was so far away from the matchless island. He originally thought that the secret place was in the Wanxiang galaxy, but now it seemed that the secret place was in another galaxy. However, it made sense. With so many cultivators coming and going from the Wanxiang galaxy, if there really was a secret place, it would have been discovered long ago. Under normal circumstances, there were powerhouses from the galaxy guarding both ends of the worm passage. In terms of cultivation base, they were at least at Yu Yao's level. Firstly, it was to prevent the local cultivators from being ambushed when they entered the Wanxiang galaxy through the worm passage. Secondly, it was to prevent people with ill intentions from entering the galaxy through the worm passage. However, this wasn't the case for all of them. There were some worm passages that didn't have any powerhouses guarding them. This kind of situation usually occurred in galaxies without powerful domains. Because there were no powerhouses, it didn't matter if there were guards or not. Anyone could pass through the worm passage freely. Lu Yi didn't know what the situation was like in the galaxy opposite the worm passage. However, he guessed that there were no powerhouses there. In other words, there might not even be a constellation hall. Half Si didn't slow down at all. He steered the planetary boat toward the worm passage and directly entered it. Lu Yi instinctively activated his power to protect himself. Traveling through the insect path was a very mysterious thing. During the process of traveling, there would be many strange forces squeezing around the insect path. These were usually the forces of spatial turbulence. If one was not careful and was sucked in, they could get lost. Lu Yi had experienced this once before. Back then, he was lucky enough to escape by borrowing the core of a void beast. Naturally, he didn't want to experience it again. However, as soon as he activated his energy to protect himself, a protective light screen appeared on the planetary boat. This planetary boat had a protective formation. It was clearly of high quality. Generally, low-priced planetary boats didn't have this kind of thing. During the process of traveling through the worm passage, Lu Yi felt his senses being disrupted. After an unknown amount of time, the disrupted senses suddenly disappeared. When he looked up again, what entered his vision was an unfamiliar starry sky. When he turned around, he saw the worm passage that he had come from. This is a nameless galaxy. Although there are a few native realms like this, there aren't any powerful experts here. Half-Ci explained casually. Her explanation matched Lu Ye's previous conjecture. Half-Ci looked around, then determined a direction, and steered the planetary boat toward it. Half a month later, when the planetary boat passed by a small realm, Half-Ci's aura suddenly changed. She cast a cold gaze toward that realm. Lu Yi sensed something and followed her gaze. His pupils constricted involuntarily, although they weren't very close. With Lu Ye's current eyesight, he could still vaguely see some scenes in that realm. Half-Ci had already changed directions and flew towards that domain. A short while later, they passed through the clouds and arrived above a city. This was clearly a realm inhabited by living beings. However, at this moment, Lu Yi sensed that the entire city was devoid of life. Many of the buildings in the city were dilapidated, and there were traces of a great battle around the city walls. Withered corpses were strewn everywhere. Lu Yi frowned and arrived at a certain spot in the city. He looked down at a corpse in front of him. The corpse was clearly left behind by a human, so it could be confirmed that the creatures living in this domain were humans. However, this person had encountered something before he died, and there was a hole in his chest. His blood and chi had completely disappeared, so even though he had been dead for a long time, his corpse was like a mummy. The other human corpses nearby were all in the same state. Every single one of them had wounds on their bodies. It looked like something had sucked their blood dry. Lu Yi raised a hand and grabbed a white thread from one of the corpses. He didn't know what it was, but when he tugged at it, he found that it was extremely tough. In terms of quality, it was not inferior to a divine sea-level treasure. The heaven-desired demonic spider's thread. Half-Ci's expression darkened. A star beast. Lu Yi frowned. Half-Ci nodded. Lu Yi was confused. Didn't they say that star beasts wouldn't invade realms? Why would they come here? Star beasts didn't have high intelligence. They only followed their instincts, just like cows eating grass and wolves eating meat. Star beasts needed the energy of the starry skies. Therefore, star beasts generally wouldn't invade the boundaries of the realms. They were active in the starry skies. This was because ordinary realms weren't attractive to star beasts, unless it was a top-level realm that could produce spirit jade veins. However, top-level realms had many powerful experts, so how could star beasts dare to invade them? Half-Ci said. Generally speaking, star beasts won't invade realms, but there are always some special ones. The heaven-desired demonic spider is one of them. Not only do they crave starry sky energy, but they also crave vitality. The situation was very clear. A heaven-desired demonic spider had come to this small realm and started a massacre. From the traces of battle left behind in the city, it was clear that there was not just one heaven-desired demonic spider, but a group of them. Let's split up and see if there are any survivors. Half-Ci said as he flew in a certain direction. Lu Yi flew in another direction. If they hadn't come across such a thing, it would have been fine. But since they had, as long as they had some compassion, they wouldn't leave them alone. After a while, Lu Yi found something. However, he didn't find anyone alive, but a group of heaven-desired demonic spiders. This group of spiders had gathered in the wilderness, and there were white spider webs everywhere. From the outside, the so-called heaven-desired demonic spiders didn't look much different from ordinary spiders. The only difference was that they were larger. The smallest was the size of a calf, and the largest was the size of a house. This should be a group of spiders. They weren't very strong, and the strongest was only comparable to a constellation. The rest were only in the deity ocean and true lake realm. Lu Yi didn't need to be polite with this group of spiders. He rushed forward and slashed with his saber. With his current strength, these spiders couldn't stop him. In just a few moments, the group of spiders was wiped out. He continued to move forward and used his spiritual will to search. Everywhere he went, there was no sign of life. This made Lu Ye's heart heavy. It seemed that the humans living in this small realm had been wiped out by the spiders. There were a lot of spiders. Once Lu Yi found them, he immediately eradicated them. Occasionally, he felt a battle on the other side of the realm. It should be half Ci. She had obviously found the group of spiders. It wasn't until a day later that Lu Yi met up with half Ci again. After a day of searching, Lu Yi didn't find a single living person. All he encountered were spiders, and they were all killed by him. Half Ci was now in a dilapidated village. There were some dried corpses left here. She stood in front of a farmer's house, and her expression was somewhat helpless. "What's the situation?" Lu Yi asked. At the same time he looked inside. Under his perception, there was a sign of life inside. This meant that there was still a living person inside. A little girl. She must have been provoked and didn't want to come out. Lu Yi stepped inside and soon came to the little girl's hiding place. End of chapter. Previously, she had tried to bring the child out of the cellar but failed. Now that Lu Yi had brought the child out, the child actually ignored her. Lu Yi also tried to coax her, but no matter what he said, the little girl just hugged him tightly and refused to let go. The two of them looked at each other helplessly. Perhaps it was because of the great change and the fact that she had lived alone in fear for so long. The little girl was extremely vigilant. Now that Lu Yi had gained a little of her trust, she quickly developed a strong sense of dependence on Lu Yi. "Do you want to do it yourself?" Half Ci asked with a smile. Lu Yi could only do it himself. Holding the little girl, he took some water from the well, then used his arts to boil the water. He found a large wooden bucket, adjusted the temperature of the water, and put the little girl inside. "Take off your clothes and wash yourself," Lu Yi ordered her. The little girl just sat in the wooden bucket and stared at him, for fear that he would disappear in the blink of an eye. Lu Yi had a headache. He persuaded her a few more times and promised that he wouldn't leave. Only then did the little girl slowly move. After changing the water several times, the little girl washed herself clean. Half Ci found the girl's clothes in the ruins and brought them over to help her put them on. This time, she didn't have much resistance to Half Ci. After washing herself clean, the little girl walked to Lu Ye's side and reached out to pull on the corner of his clothes. She stood quietly, not making a sound. Suddenly, there was a rumbling sound. Lu Yi looked down at the little girl's stomach and realized that she should be hungry. So he found some food from this region and cooked it for her to eat. After the meal, the little girl slowly fell asleep. She was very soundly asleep. Lu Yi and Half Ci were in a dilemma. The two looked at each other. After a while Lu Yi said, "What should we do?" They were just passing by. They were going to the secret place mentioned by Half Ci. But now they saved a little girl. Such a young child, who had never even been in contact with cultivation, was definitely not suitable to take her with them. But it was even more inappropriate to leave her here. She was the only living person in this entire region. It would be too cruel to leave her here. Half Ci hesitated for a moment and said, "Leave it to me." Saying so, he raised his hand and took out an object. The object looked inconspicuous, like a piece of charcoal, but as Half Ci urged his spiritual power, he shone the charcoal on the little girl's body. A mysterious fluctuation came out of nowhere, and the little girl suddenly disappeared without a trace. Lu Yi stared at the charcoal in Half Ci's hand and was extremely surprised. A small world. Half Ci was also surprised. Fellow Taoist Li's eyesight is quite good. You can actually recognize this as a small world. Lu Yi didn't speak. Of course he didn't recognize it. He just guessed casually. He didn't expect this to really be a small world. After all, as far as he knew, only a small world could accommodate a living person. He had seen some records in the Rest Abyss Pavilion, and knew that this thing was an extremely rare treasure. No one knew how this treasure was born, but from the outside, one could not see anything special about it. However, inside, it was a world of its own. This world might be very small, and had no offensive or defensive effects, but it had some other benefits. Accommodating living people was only one of its insignificant functions. Half-Ci actually had a small world, which made Lu Yi even more unable to see through her. This thing was not something an ordinary cultivator could have. Don't starve her to death, Lu Yi exhorted. The little girl was just a mortal, and still needed to eat and drink. Even if she was taken in by Half-Ci, if she was left alone for a long time, she would definitely die. Don't worry, Half-Ci replied and put away the food Lu Yi had found. Then, she went to find more food and water, and threw them into the small world. Without any worries, the two of them set off again. After a month or so, they finally arrived at their destination. On a huge floating continent, Half-Ci put away her starboat, and stood side by side with Lu Yi in front of a deep cave. Is this the place? Lu Yi asked. Half-Ci nodded. Lu Yi looked around, and didn't see anything special. Half-Ci knew what he was thinking and explained with a smile. It's precisely because there's nothing special about this place that it won't attract attention. Although this place is remote, there will always be some cultivators passing by. If it's really special, it would have been discovered long ago. There's a limit to the mysteries of that secret place. Every time it's used, it will take a long time to recover. Fellow Taoist, if you want to change your spiritual power in the future, you can come here. Lu Yi nodded. Thank you for your kindness, fellow Taoist. However, if he really wanted to change his spiritual power, he could just go to the Constellation Hall. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Let's go in, Half-Ci said and took the lead to enter the cave. Lu Yi followed closely behind. However, after entering, Lu Yi threw out an imperial tool nearby. This was out of habit. Whenever he entered an unknown place like this, he would leave a backup plan behind. He was somewhat puzzled. Based on his recent observations of Half-Ci, this woman should be from a good family. Otherwise, she wouldn't even have a small world. If that was the case, why would she choose him if she wanted someone to protect her? It also didn't make sense that she had some ulterior motives. Lu Yi didn't sense any malice from her. She even revealed the location of this secret place to him. He couldn't figure it out, so he didn't bother to think about it. The cave was very deep, and it took them dozens of breaths to reach the bottom. Half-Ci, who had arrived first, had already thrown out some illuminating objects, illuminating the surroundings with hazy light. Only then did Lu Yi get a clear look at the environment. It seemed to be a huge karst cave, with strangely shaped stone pillars in all directions. Only at the very front was a strange stone slab, like a staircase, extending upward step by step. Lu Yi looked on in amazement, because these stone slabs clearly had no point of support, yet they were still floating in the air. There were a total of 99 stone slabs, all of them extending nearly 1,000 feet into the air. On the highest level of stone slab, there was a strange stone cauldron that was emitting a hazy mist. The mist flowed out of the stone cauldron and flowed down the stone slabs like a waterfall. Half-Ci carefully observed and smiled. It seems that no one has come here recently. Fellow Taoistly, you stay here. If someone comes in, I'll have to trouble you to block them for me. Lu Yi nodded. Although the probability of this happening was low, Half-Ci invited him here to guard against such a situation. There were some things that one couldn't be too careful about. In order to make sure nothing went wrong, Lu Yi immediately began to arrange a formation. Half-Ci wasn't in a hurry to start. Instead, she silently sat cross-legged for a while. When Lu Yi was almost done arranging the formation, Half-Ci also adjusted herself to her best state. Then she got up and walked towards the stairs. Lu Yi was very curious about how this place tempered a cultivator's spirit force, so he naturally wanted to observe it. What he saw was Half-Ci raising her foot to the bottom of the stairs. But what made Lu Yi somewhat puzzled was that Half-Ci seemed to be under a lot of pressure when she took this step. Because her movements were very slow, the first step landed on the stairs, and the next step only landed after 3 breaths. After standing firm, the white mist on the stairs poured into Bansi's body like a living creature, and disappeared into her body. Lu Yi guessed that the white mist should be the source of the spirit force that could help people temper their spirit force. Hafsi paused for a moment, presumably to refine the power of the white mist. Then she took a step and landed on the second step. This chapter ends. Chapter 1502. Hansi's movements were very slow. Often, it would take a long time for her to take another step. Wherever she went, the hazy fog would disappear. Lu Yi was increasingly certain that the fog was the source that could help cultivators refine their spiritual power. He raised his head and looked at the strange stone cauldron at the top of the stairs. The fog was the source that helped cultivators refine their spiritual power, and the source of the fog was the stone cauldron. In other words, the stone cauldron was a treasure. If he could take the stone cauldron with him, wouldn't he be able to refine his spiritual power at any time? In the future, if any of his friends or family wanted to advance to the Yuyao realm, they wouldn't have to bother buying those precious spirit pills. However, Lu Yi only thought about it. Hansi had known about this place for a long time, but the stone cauldron had always been there. This was undoubtedly a problem. This stone cauldron wouldn't be so easy to take. A day later, Hansi was already halfway up the stairs. At this speed, she should be able to reach the end in another 2 or 3 days. At that time, her spiritual power would change, and she would meet the conditions for advancing to the Yuyao realm. Although this trip took a lot of time, it was just running. The reward was a piece of heavenly phoenix blue crystal, which wasn't bad. Another day later, Hansi had already reached the 80th step, which was about the same as Lu Ye's calculation. But at this point, the pressure on Hansi clearly increased. She often had to rest for a long time before she could take another step. At a certain moment, Lu Yi suddenly discovered that Hansi's body was trembling slightly. He realized that the situation wasn't good. Hansi seemed to have reached her limit. Upon closer inspection, her clothes were soaked in sweat and clung to her body. Lu Yi already knew that she had a good figure, but he didn't know it was this good. For a moment, he couldn't help but take a few more glances. His heart was burning, and even his gaze became aggressive. As if sensing his gaze, Hansi's body trembled even more violently. No. Lu Ye's expression suddenly became vigilant. Although he would usually take a few more glances if he encountered a beautiful female cultivator or a good figure, it was only a glance. Everyone had their own aesthetic preferences. If he encountered someone or something that suited his taste, it was normal to take a few more glances. It was an instinct. But Lu Yi never had any evil thoughts because of this. But just now, he actually had some thoughts that he shouldn't have. The reason for that, Lu Yi faintly felt that this was not the case. He wanted to withdraw his gaze, but there was a voice in the depths of his heart that stopped him. It made his gaze even more aggressive, like a leech that was biting on Hansi's curvaceous body, and his mind was filled with thoughts. Lu Yi quickly calmed his mind and observed his body. There were no abnormalities. It was as if everything that happened just now was just following the actions of his heart. However, this was obviously not right. Something must have affected him. However, he had the talent tree. If any strange external force invaded his body, the talent tree would react. So far, he had only heard by Lu's singing in the merfolk territory, which had affected his rationality a little. But that was the mystery of the merfolk's singing, which was not something the ability of the talent tree could resolve. In the end, he had relied on his strong willpower to get rid of the influence of Bailu's singing. But the situation this time was completely different from that time. He knew that the thoughts that emerged in his mind were wrong, but the more he wanted to restrain himself, the more difficult it was to extricate himself. He even had a kind of impatience to immerse himself in it and quickly put it into action. It could be said that the power that affected him this time was even more terrifying than Bailu's singing. This made one's hair stand on end. There was no abnormality in his body, so the problem was not his body. Thinking of this, Lu Yi quickly checked his spirit sea. When his soul avatar appeared, Lu Yi was slightly startled because he found that there was a pink mist floating in his spirit sea at some unknown time. Moreover, the mist was still changing according to his thoughts, constantly expanding. The more he wanted to restrain those thoughts that he shouldn't have, the faster the pink mist expanded, as if it wanted to envelop his spirit sea. And as the mist expanded, he found that his thoughts were becoming more and more crazy. Fellow Taoist Li, Hansi's voice suddenly came from the stairs. Her voice was trembling, as if she was trying to endure something. Lu Yi looked up and saw that Hansi had turned around to face him at some unknown time. Her face was frighteningly red and her fists were tightly clenched, her nails digging into her palms and bleeding. Lu Yi could tell at a glance that she was facing the same problem as him, but her willpower was obviously as strong as his. Otherwise she would have succumbed to the distracting thoughts that constantly emerged in her mind. It wasn't Hansi's doing. Lu Yi originally thought that Hansi had secretly done something, but seeing her like this, he knew he was wrong. But if it wasn't Hansi, then what was the problem? Before Lu Yi could ask, Hansi answered, "The heaven-desired demonic spider." What? Lu Yi was surprised. Hansi closed her eyes and her chest heaved violently. "We didn't kill all the heaven-desired demonic spiders. There are even stronger heaven-desired demonic spiders. They might have been hiding here all this time, or they might have secretly followed us here. Only by finding them and killing them can we be free, otherwise." She didn't say what would happen, but Lu Yi knew that the result would be bad. But how could there be a heaven-desired demonic spider here? He hadn't noticed anything strange at all. As he looked around, Lu Yi was shocked to discover that there were strands of white spider silk all over the cave. They crisscrossed and weaved together, covering the entire cave. When he looked back, he saw that the entrance he and Hansi had come from was covered by a spider web. This was unbelievable. Although he had been observing Hansi's situation for the past 2 days, he hadn't let his guard down. He had no idea when these spider silken webs had appeared. Lu Yi faintly realized that they were in big trouble this time. No matter whether the heaven-desired demonic spider had been hiding here all along, or had secretly followed them here, it was definitely extremely powerful. It was very likely that it was one of Yu Yao's star beasts. Otherwise, there was no way they could have gone undetected. Forcefully suppressing the distracting thoughts in his mind, Lu Yi raised his Pan Shan saber and slashed at the spider web behind him. The saber slashed down, but to Lu Yi's surprise, the seemingly weak spider web didn't seem to be affected at all. The Pan Shan saber enhanced with the divine edge spirit mark couldn't cut it at all. Instead, an extremely strong adhesive force came from the spider web and firmly stuck the Pan Shan saber to it. Lu Yi's spiritual energy surged and madly poured into the saber. In an instant, the Pan Shan saber ignited with violent flames. The spider web was still intact. This made Lu Yi even more certain that the heaven-desired demonic spider, hiding in the dark, was a Yu Yao star beast. Just the spider web alone was so strong that it couldn't be compared to the heaven-desired demonic spiders he had killed before. As the sound of something breaking through the air rang out, a few strands of spider silk suddenly flew out from the spider web toward Lu Yi. Lu Yi's eyes twitched, and he hurriedly retreated. However, the Pan Shan saber landed on the spider web and was quickly covered by it. The saber couldn't be seen anymore. This was the first time that a weapon cultivator had lost his weapon. However, in that situation, if he hadn't abandoned the saber, he would have been entangled by the spider silk. The spider silk came from all directions, and Lu Yi had to dodge it in a very sorry state. His current situation wasn't optimistic. On one hand, he had to fight with the various distracting thoughts in the depths of his heart. The more he fought, the more violent they became. On the other hand, he had to dodge the spider silk and search for the heaven-desired demonic spider. In just a few moments, Lu Yi felt a little weak. With the support of the insight spirit tattoo, Lu Yi couldn't even see a shadow, let alone the heaven-desired demonic spider. In this situation, if he wanted to escape, he could use the imperial equipment he had left outside the cave to activate the void spirit tattoo. However, if he left like this, the Pan Shan saber would be gone. Moreover, if he left Bansi here alone, she would definitely die. Bansi's situation was even worse. Although she was also dodging the spider silk, the various desires in her heart were obviously affecting her greatly. Thus, it didn't take long for one of her hands to be entangled by the spider silk. This time, the situation was even worse. A few more strands of spider silk came, and Bansi couldn't dodge them anymore. Her hands and legs were tightly bound. When Lu Yi saw this, he knew that she was finished. He was afraid that Bansi would die in the next moment. However, what puzzled Lu Yi was that after binding Bansi, the heaven-desired demonic spider didn't have any intention of killing her. And judging from Bansi's expression, she didn't seem to be very flustered. Her eyes had already become extremely blurred, like spring water, but the expression on her face was one of extreme shame and indignation. The moment her entire body was bound, the shame and indignation disappeared and was replaced by a resolute determination, as if she had made up her mind. Li Taibai, do you know why it didn't kill us? Bansi suddenly asked. I don't know. Lu Yi was dodging the spider silk attacks from all directions. He was also puzzled by Bansi's question. At this moment, if the heaven-desired demonic spider wanted to kill Bansi, it could do so easily. Moreover, Lu Yi could feel that the spider silk attacking him only wanted to trap him and didn't have any intention of hurting or killing him. The heaven-desired demonic spider, hiding in the dark, didn't have any intention of killing him. Because it wants to suck our blood essence, Bansi explained. Even if it kills us, it can still suck our blood. Lu Yi said. It's not the same. Bansi shook her head. This is a moon jade stage heaven-desired demonic spider. Ordinary blood essence doesn't have much of an attraction to it. What it wants is blood essence that has reached the peak of passion. That's what it desires, especially since we're both late constellation stage cultivators, is undoubtedly very attractive to it. Now that it's hiding in the dark, you and I won't be able to find it. And before it succeeds, it won't easily show itself. End of chapter. Chapter 1503. Lu Yi didn't know where Han Xi got this information from, because even in the Mini-Man's Rest Abyss Pavilion, he hadn't seen any records of this. However, along the way, Hansi's knowledge and experience had left a deep impression on Lu Yi. Since she said so, then it must be true. What should I do? Lu Yi dodged the spider silk in a sorry state, feeling like he couldn't hold on any longer. There wasn't much space to move around in here, and the exit was tightly sealed by the spider web. Unless he used the imperial tool he left outside to activate the void spirit pattern, he wouldn't be able to escape. But if he really did that, he would definitely lose the Pan Mountain Blade, and Han Xi would also be in danger. Most importantly, the distracting thoughts in his heart were extremely fierce, causing a great impact on his mind. This was something he had never encountered before. Lure it out, Han Xi said through gritted teeth. Lu Yi saw through her intentions, and the last bit of determination in his heart abruptly loosened. This caused his movements to become slightly sluggish, and a strand of spider silk immediately bound him tightly. More strands of spider silk floated over and stuck to Lu Yi's body. Lu Yi tried to break free, but he was powerless. He looked at Han Xi with a complicated expression. Your information better be right. Because if the information was wrong, he might be fine, and he could just teleport away. But Hansi's sacrifice would be great. However, this was still hope, and it was better than leaving Han Xi here alone. Han Xi closed her eyes, as if she had accepted her fate. When a tearing sound came out, the spider silk stuck to Hansi's body suddenly exerted force, and tore her clothes to shreds. She wasn't the only one who encountered this. Lu Yi also encountered this. Then Lu Yi found that his entire body was out of control. Under the control of the spider silk stuck to his body, he seemed to have become a puppet. Hansi's situation was clearly the same. Han Xi, who had already reached the 80th step, trembled. Under the control of the spider silk, she stiffly floated down and landed in front of Lu Yi. Hansi's long eyelashes trembled, although she had expected this and was mentally prepared. When it really happened, she still felt ashamed and angry. Originally, she had only asked Li Taibai to accompany her here to test him, because she suspected that Li Taibai might be another person she knew. If that was the case, she might need to try to rope him in, but she didn't expect things to develop to this point. However, she couldn't think of any other way to lure the heaven-desired demonic spider out, especially when she was bound by the spider silk. The burning gaze and aura from the other side made her tremble. Normally, such a gaze would be extremely disgusting, but under the influence of the heaven-desired demonic spider, she found that she couldn't feel disgusted, and instead, she felt a bit happy. She opened her eyes abruptly and looked at Lu Yi in front of her in a daze. Then her face changed rapidly. Lu Yi was surprised to find that the Han Xi she usually saw was not her true appearance. She had used some mysterious method to change her appearance. Normally, Han Xi's appearance was not bad, but her real appearance was even more beautiful. It was an indescribable beauty. In comparison, Lu Yi had seen Han Xi as a bit playful in the past, but now, she was even more graceful. Without a sound, the two marionettes approached each other quickly. The scorching aura spread out in the cave. They were completely intoxicated, as if they were about to fall into it completely. Even the changes of the sun and the moon outside could not affect them at all. Until a certain moment, a hairy claw covered in barbs appeared out of thin air. Before this, neither Lu Yi nor Han Xi had noticed it, and when it appeared, the two of them didn't have time to react. The claw was like a bolt of lightning, piercing through Lu Yi's chest, and then into Han Xi's body, who was clinging to Lu Yi. Even their late constellation realm bodies were like paper in front of this sudden attack, and they were skewered together. Pleasure and pain assaulted them at the same time, and they both groaned. However, thanks to the intense pain, their almost blurred eyes suddenly regained a trace of clarity. Han Xi looked past Lu Yi's shoulder and stared behind him. Although she couldn't see the heaven-desired demonic spider, she knew that it was hiding there. She opened her mouth and shot out a beam of golden light. She didn't know what kind of treasure it was, but it was extremely powerful. Han Xi had been preparing for this moment, so it could be said that she was going all out in this attack. This was also the attack she relied on to turn defeat into victory. This was an attack that even Yu Yao couldn't ignore. If this attack didn't work, then she and Lu Yi could only wait for death. At almost the same time Han Xi moved, Lu Yi also activated the power of his innate skill tree. His deity C, which was filled with pink mist, suddenly burst into flames. The color and nature of these flames were exactly the same as the flames burning on his innate skill tree. In the past, the innate skill tree could only burn away the impurities that invaded the body, and it couldn't be used in the deity C. But after the innate skill tree's third transformation, Lu Yi discovered that the innate skill tree's power could be used in the deity C. This was a coincidental discovery, but Lu Yi had never used it before. Previously, when the Spiritas woman invaded his deity C, if Lu Yi had used it, her soul would have been burned to ashes. The merfolk's song was ethereal, and the innate skill tree's power was useless. But now, the pink mist that invaded his deity C was something that the innate skill tree could burn. When he first discovered the pink mist, Lu Yi had considered whether he should use the innate skill tree's power. But at that time, the heaven-desired demonic spider was hiding in the dark. Even if he used it, he couldn't find the heaven-desired demonic spider, so he could only endure. Lu Yi didn't know what the pink mist was, but since it could invade his deity C, it was most likely the heaven-desired demonic spider's spiritual power. So, Lu Yi deduced that once the pink mist was burned, the heaven-desired demonic spider's fate would not be good. Lu Yi's guess was right. When the innate skill tree's flame in his deity C began to burn, a sharp sound suddenly rang out. Then he felt an extremely powerful aura behind him. Facing him, Han Xi saw even more clearly, because the heaven-desired demonic spider, which was supposed to be invisible, was suddenly exposed. Moreover, it seemed to be injured, and it began to hiss violently. At this time, Han Xi was about to unleash her long-prepared attack. Originally, when the heaven-desired demonic spider did not reveal itself, she didn't have much confidence in her attack. But when the golden light shot out, the heaven-desired demonic spider's figure was revealed. With a thought, Hansi controlled her golden light to fly straight into the heaven-desired demonic spider's open mouth. Green blood splattered, and the heaven-desired demonic spider became more and more painful. Its ferocious mouth became tattered. Hansi's heart sank because she found that although her attack had caused a certain degree of damage to the heaven-desired demonic spider, it was not fatal. After all, the difference in strength was too great. It's over. The heaven-desired demonic spider was in pain and retreated. The claws that had strung Lu Yi and Hansi together were also pulled out of their bodies. Blood spurted out, and Lu Yi did not have time to check his injuries. Under his high concentration, he did not even feel the pain of his wounds. He raised his hand and summoned the sword gourd. The mountain pan saber was bound in the spider web, and now the only thing he could quickly use that could pose a threat to the heaven-desired demonic spider was the sword gourd. The mouth of the sword gourd was aimed in the direction of the heaven-desired demonic spider, and with a surge of spiritual power, 9 sharp and unparalleled sword chi suddenly shot out. The target of the attack was the heaven-desired demonic spider's tattered mouth, which was its only weakness. These 9 sword chi were derived from the sword gourd after swallowing the withered skeleton general's magic treasure sword. Lu Yi had never used them before, and compared to the other sword chi in the sword gourd, these 9 sword chi were especially powerful. The 9 sword chi simultaneously blasted into the heaven-desired demonic spider's mouth. Lu Yi could vaguely hear some of its internal organs being torn and destroyed. The heaven-desired demonic spider hissed even louder. It was obvious that this attack had caused it no small amount of damage. This was not the end. Lu Yi's other hand held a short arrow. This was a rare treasure that he had won at a high price from the auction on the Island of Wonders not long ago. It was a treasure that could pose a threat to Yu Yao. However, although this thing was powerful, it had a drawback that could not be ignored. That was, it needed to store up energy. Unlike the sword gourd, which Lu Yi could activate with a thought, the short arrow required Lu Yi to activate enough spiritual power to display its full power. This was the drawback of all rare treasures, including the talisman. As he released the sword gourd's sword chi, Lu Yi had already activated his spiritual power and poured it into the short arrow. When the power of the 9 sword chi was exhausted, the short arrow was activated. The short arrow in Lu Yi's hand shook slightly, turned into a stream of light, and instantly arrived in front of the heaven-desired demonic spider. Normally, with the strength of the heaven-desired demonic spider, whether it was the sword chi of the sword gourd or the short arrow, they would not be much of a threat to it. Even a blow that Lu Yi had prepared for a long time might not be able to hurt it. But Lu Yi had used the power of the talent tree to incinerate the pink mist that had invaded its divine sea, causing it a great deal of trouble. The pink mist was the manifestation of its spiritual energy, and when it was incinerated by the talent tree, its spiritual energy was injured. Under the pain, its reactions were naturally much slower. The short arrow also pierced into the heaven-desired demonic spider's mouth. As expected of a rare treasure, the power of this blow was even stronger than the 9 sword chi of the sword gourd. It directly pierced through the heaven-desired demonic spider's body and came out from behind. In a short moment, Lu Yi and Bansi had launched 3 waves of powerful attacks. Even though they had the intention to attack, the powerful heaven-desired demonic spider was still beaten dizzy and disoriented. Its body was injured, and it could not stop hissing. End of chapter. Chapter 1504. However, the vitality of the star beasts of the Moon Jade Realm was extremely strong. Even if it was heavily injured, it was not in danger of dying. Under the pain, the demon spider waved its claws, the sharp barbs on its claws flashing with a cold light. Lu Yi immediately turned around and hugged the obviously weak Hansi behind him. Her soft body was in his arms, but he did not have the heart to feel it. Behind the demon spider, there were layers of holy protection spirit inscriptions. The demon spider waved its claws, shattering the layers of holy guard spirit patterns. Lu Yi felt a sharp pain on his back as a foot-long wound appeared. Even the flesh around the wound was gouged out by the barbs on the claws. Using the force from behind, the two rolled to the side. Asterisk sha sha sha. Asterisk the demon spider rushed over with its claws, looking extremely angry. Han Si, who struggled to get up, could not help but sigh. In the end she was powerless. Then she saw the naked Lu Yi standing in front of her. And as far as her eyes could see, the hideous wound on his back was bleeding. The next moment, she showed a look of astonishment, because Lu Yi suddenly took out a ball-like thing. Under the surge of spiritual power, the ball-like thing suddenly collapsed, and then wrapped around his body. In an instant, a 3-foot-tall, scarlet figure appeared in her field of vision. A wild and overbearing aura filled the air. The aura was so substantial that it caused the void around the figure to distort slightly. The tall figure covered the demon spider's ugliness, but also cut off its fierceness, giving Han Si an inexplicable sense of security. Yin armor. Han Si was experienced and knowledgeable, so naturally she could tell at a glance that this was a full-body armor. In the starry sky, although there were not many cultivators of the Yanshi school, there were still quite a few of them. She had seen many of the best yin armors, but few of them could be compared to the one in front of her. Gorgeous, wild, soaring to the sky, as if it could poke a hole in the sky. She immediately realized that this armor was probably extraordinary because she sensed a strange aura from it, and it was the aura of an extremely formidable ferocious beast. Lu Yi hadn't used the Dragon Emperor in a long time, mainly because he hadn't had the opportunity to do so. However, he didn't have the Pan Shan knife, and the Sword Gourd's 9 most powerful sword chis had been activated. Other than using the Dragon Emperor, the only thing he could think of was activating the Red Talisman. However, the Red Talisman was precious, and Lu Yi was somewhat reluctant to use it. He could only use the Dragon Emperor. With the dragon throne draped over his body, Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed the dragon spine saber in his hand. The exaggerated long saber matched the sleek design of his armor. Not far in front of him was a ferocious star beast pouncing toward him. Their auras intertwined and collided, rendering the small karst cave an atmosphere of either death or destruction. Facing the huge demon spider, Lu Yi stepped forward and swung the dragon spine saber, heavily striking the demon spider's back. However, this powerful strike didn't do much to the demon spider, only leaving a shallow wound on its back. This guy's back didn't seem to have a strong defense, but as a Jade Moon Star beast, its physical body was extremely strong. Lu Yi was inevitably at a disadvantage when fighting it with the power of a constellation. When the dragon spine saber struck, the demon spider's claws stabbed at him like lightning. Lu Yi wanted to dodge, but he couldn't and was directly hit. Fortunately, the Dragon Emperor's material was good. This time, Lu Yi only suffered a shock, but it didn't do much damage to him. Lu Yi felt confident. As long as the Dragon Emperor could block the demon spider's attack, then he would have a chance to kill this guy. He realized that he had always underestimated the Dragon Emperor. When he obtained it, he was only in the True Lake realm. At that time, he barely managed to activate the Dragon Emperor's attack, but he was already exhausted. At that time, Lu Yi realized that with his strength, he couldn't unleash the full power of the Dragon Emperor. He had used it when he was in the Divine Sea realm, but he still couldn't support it. At that time, Lu Yi wondered if he could only withstand the pressure of using the Dragon Emperor after reaching the Constellation realm. But now, he was already in the late Constellation realm. When he used the Dragon Emperor, the consumption was still terrifying. He couldn't last long. The magic of this crescent armor was beyond his imagination. In the cave, Lu Yi and the demon spider were locked in a fierce battle. Half Si leaned weakly against the cave wall, dumbfounded. She had never imagined that a constellation would be able to contend against Yu Yao in such a manner. Admittedly, this constellation was currently borrowing the power of a powerful armor. At the same time, the Yu Yao star beast was heavily injured. However, if the constellation's foundation was not strong enough, no matter how much external power it borrowed, no matter how heavily injured its enemy was, it would still be impossible for it to be a match for the constellation. However, under her observation, the battle on the other side was actually in a state of being evenly matched. Previously, when Peerless Island was attacked, she knew that Li Taibai was very strong, but she never thought that Li Taibai was strong to this extent. This was beyond the constellation realm's capabilities. As time passed, Lu Ye's side slowly gained the upper hand. It wasn't that Yu Yao wasn't strong enough, but that the demon spider was seriously injured. Disregarding the irreparable damage to Yu Yao from having her spiritual energy incinerated, just half-seas attack, Lu Ye's 9-sword chi, and the short arrow were enough to make her suffer. To Yu Yao, this kind of injury wasn't fatal, but it greatly affected her ability to display her strength. At this point in the fierce battle, the demon spider also felt that things were not good. Although it didn't have much intelligence, it had the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. It repeatedly tried to escape, but how could Lu Yi, who had the upper hand, give it the chance? He waved his saber, enveloping the demon spider in his saber momentum. The saber momentum was endless. It was the essence of the myriad tidal waves. Coupled with the might of the Dragon Emperor, it was enough for Lu Yi, as a constellation realm cultivator, to contend with a greatly weakened Jade Moon Star Beast. After fighting for a long time, Lu Yi finally found a good opportunity. The dragon spine saber stabbed into the demon spider's body through its mouth, and the saber directly pierced through the back of the demon spider's head. The demon spider's claws constantly jabbed at Lu Yi, causing his body to shake violently, but he didn't take a single step back. Instead, he poured his strength into the dragon spine saber, causing the blade to ignite with raging flames. Gradually, the demon spider's resistance weakened until it completely subsided. Only then did Lu Yi pull out the dragon spine saber and take a few steps back. Blood dripped from the saber. Lu Yi released his divine sense and confirmed that the demon was dead. Only then did Lu Yi let out a long sigh of relief. He untied the dragon throne and put away the dragon spine saber. Then his body wobbled for a while before he slowly sat down. His face was pale, and there was a hole in his chest. It was the demon spider's first sneak attack. Fortunately, his heart wasn't injured. Otherwise, even if he didn't die, Lu Ye's strength would have been greatly reduced, and he wouldn't have been able to continue fighting. On his back there was a bone-deep wound. In addition, his whole body was in unbearable pain and extremely weak. First, it was the aftereffect of using the Dragon Emperor. Once this thing was brought out, it would constantly consume and devour his foundation at a terrifying speed. Second, he was also injured by the demon spider's counterattack. Although the Dragon Emperor's defense was strong, the power of the demon spider's counterattack could not be resolved. At this moment, Lu Yi felt that his whole body was falling apart. Looking up at Ban Ci, their eyes met, and they were speechless. Lu Yi took out a healing pill, stuffed it into his mouth, and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. Seeing that he wouldn't die for a while, Ban Ci was relieved and began to recover. Time passed. During this time, Lu Yi felt that there was some movement on Ban Ci's side, but he ignored it. He was seriously injured in this battle. Even if he was in the late constellation realm, it would take a few days to recover. A few days later, when Lu Yi was full of energy again, he opened his eyes, but Ban Ci had already disappeared. When the woman left, Lu Yi noticed it, but he didn't stop her. After what happened before, Lu Yi also didn't want to face her. It didn't seem like a bad idea to part ways like this. However, Ban Ci obviously didn't achieve her goal this time, because she didn't reach the top of the stairs. In the current situation, it was not suitable for her to continue. Perhaps she would come again in the future. After all, advancing to the Yu Yao realm wasn't something that could be done in a short time. Lu Yi lowered his head to check his injuries. He had basically recovered. He took out a new set of clothes and put them on. Then he walked to the entrance of the cave and retrieved the Pan Shan saber. When the demon spider was still alive, the Pan Shan saber was tightly wrapped in spider silk. Now that the demon spider was dead, the spider silk seemed to have lost its original power and was easily torn apart. Hanging the Pan Shan saber at his waist, Lu Yi came to the demon spider's corpse. The demon beasts in the domain had Yao cores, while the star beasts in the starry sky had crystal cores. They were essentially the same thing. Many star beasts' crystal cores were useful, especially the star beasts of the Yu Yao realm. They were worth some money, Lu Yi searched for a while and took the crystal core out of the demon spider's body. Although the demon spider was huge, its crystal core was only the size of a fist. Lu Yi looked up at the stone cauldron at the top of the stairs. Although he knew it was impossible, he still couldn't help but want to try. This thing was a treasure. If he could take it away, it would be convenient for someone around him to advance to the Yu Yao realm in the future. He stepped up the stairs. Originally, he was vigilant because when he saw Ban Xi move, she seemed to be under a lot of pressure. But when he went up, he didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure. He easily reached the 80 or so steps. This was where Ban Xi had stopped before. If he went up, he would be shrouded in the mist that flowed out of the stone cauldron. When Lu Yi took another step, he suddenly felt a huge pressure on his body. He couldn't help but lower his body. Hurriedly, he circulated the spirit power in his body to avoid the fate of falling. The mist on the stairs seemed to be attracted, gathering towards Lu Yi and entering his body. Lu Yi silently sensed for a moment and was slightly surprised, because the moment the mist rushed into his body, he felt a strange force acting on his spirit power and madly condensing it. End of chapter. Chapter 1505. Under the effects of that mysterious mist, Lu Yi could clearly feel his spiritual power being compressed and tempered. This was most likely the source of the transformation of spiritual power into magic power. Once the spiritual power in a cultivator's body was completely transformed into magic power, the cultivator would have the ability to evolve into Yu Yao. Lu Yi had only recently ascended to the late-stage constellation realm. Furthermore, he hadn't cultivated properly since his ascension, so his bone marrow was far from being refined to its peak. There was still a long way to go before he could evolve into Yu Yao. However, if the spiritual power in his body could become more condensed, it would also be beneficial to him. At the very least, it would be much easier for him to evolve into Yu Yao in the future. Thus, even though Lu Yi felt the pressure, he didn't retreat. Instead, he continued to ascend. Step by step, Lu Yi walked very slowly with each step. It wasn't until an entire day later that Lu Yi finally reached the top of the stairs. The mysterious stone cauldron was right in front of him. This thing wasn't very big, only about the size of a water tank. It rested on the highest step. When he looked down, he could clearly see the mysterious mist emanating from the stone cauldron. Just as he had guessed, this stone cauldron was the source of this mysterious mist. He spread his arms and hugged the stone cauldron. He tried to lift it up, but it didn't budge at all. He couldn't help but increase his strength, but he still couldn't budge it in the slightest. Lu Yi couldn't help but feel puzzled. He looked around and found that the stone cauldron didn't seem to be attached to the stairs. It was just sitting there, but for some reason, they seemed to have grown together. Unwilling to give up, he summoned the dragon throne and tried again, but he still couldn't move it. Lu Yi couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. As expected, if this thing could really be moved, it probably wouldn't have been left here for so long. Han Xi had already thought of a way to move it. He couldn't move the stone cauldron, and the mysterious mist emanating from the stone cauldron had already been exhausted. He didn't know when it would recover, so there was no need to stay here any longer. Lu Yi exited the cave, summoned his star boat, determined the direction, and flew off into the depths of the starry sky. He had come with the two of them, but now he was going back alone and helpless. Speaking of which, Han Xi had invited him here to protect her, so that she wouldn't be disturbed while she was refining her spiritual power. However, such a mishap had occurred instead. The promised reward was probably gone as well. Fortunately, he had recorded the route on his way here. Otherwise, he really wouldn't know how to return at this time. It took him less than 3 months to get here, and it took him about the same amount of time to get back. The entire journey was dull and tedious. When Lu Yi returned to the 10,000 Elephant Sea and arrived at the unparalleled island, he almost thought that he had come to the wrong place. He took out the star map and compared it seriously. Only then did he confirm that the spiritual island in front of him was the unparalleled island. Compared to when he left half a year ago, the current unparalleled island had obviously undergone earth-shaking changes. The spiritual island was filled with streets and shops. Cultivators walked in and out from time to time. Although it was not as grand as the island of versatility, it was still quite lively. This was especially true of one particular shop. Cultivators were lined up in a long line outside of it. But the strange thing was that the door of the shop was closed. It was clear that the shop was not open yet. Lu Yi looked at the signboard of the shop and saw 5 words written on it. Kindred Spirit Linking Branches. Lu Yi immediately understood what this shop was selling. It was obvious that Chu Shun was carrying out his previous plan to sell the Kindred Spirit Linking Formation Disc to attract the popularity of the Unparalleled Island. From the looks of it, it was undoubtedly very good. How many constellations were there in the 10,000 Elephant Sea? However, there were not many treasures that could significantly increase the strength of a team. The Kindred Spirit Linking Formation Disc was the most well-known one. Although a few top forces had started to sell this item, the quantity was limited, and the price was not cheap. It could be said that as long as any force sold the formation disc, it would be able to attract a lot of popularity in a short period of time. The long line of cultivators was all for this reason. The Unparalleled Island was obviously standing in the wind. The cultivators who were attracted by the formation disc became the popularity of the Unparalleled Island. With popularity, there would naturally be transactions. It was easy to use this to attract the major forces to set up shop on the Unparalleled Island. At the moment, there were many shops on the Unparalleled Island. However, most of them were still empty. Only a small portion of them had opened for business. However, this was not a big problem. As long as the popularity of the Unparalleled Island could be maintained, the other forces would see the potential of the Unparalleled Island. Even if Chu Shun did not approach them, they would take the initiative to ask for cooperation. In just half a year, the Unparalleled Island was obviously on the right track. As long as they could maintain this popularity and allow more forces to maintain a cooperative relationship with the Unparalleled Island, it would be difficult for others to have designs on this island in the future. For countless years in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, there had never been a spiritual island that rose so quickly. The Unparalleled Island could be said to be the first since the beginning of time. Lu Yi also saw 3 different ferry ports on the Unparalleled Island. The cultivators who came from the outside had to pass through the ferry ports before they could enter the island. However, unlike the 10,000 Elephant Island, the Unparalleled Island was currently gathering popularity. Hence, the ferry ports had not started to collect spiritual jades. Naturally, Lu Yi did not need to enter through the ferry ports. He had the nameplate of the Unparalleled Island and was considered a member of the Unparalleled Island. He could directly pass through the protective formation and enter the island. The moment he entered the formation, Chu Shun, who was discussing cooperation with a group of representatives, sensed his presence. He could not help but be delighted. However, he could not leave for the time being and could only speed up the pace of the discussion. After not returning for half a year, Lu Yi realized that the starry sky energy of the Unparalleled Island was much richer than when he left. Although it was still at the level of a middle-grade spiritual island, as long as this momentum was maintained, it would not take long for it to become a high-grade spiritual island. At that time, the value of the Unparalleled Island would definitely be greater. At this point, Lu Yi's plan to use the minor constellation hall to create a spiritual island was considered a success. However, as to what the Unparalleled Island would eventually become, it would take a long time to observe. A high-grade spiritual island was not far away. Whether it could become a top-grade spiritual island, like the 10,000 Elephant Island, was still unknown. As a top-grade spiritual island was related to spiritual jade mines, Lu Yi was not sure if the minor constellation hall could achieve this. Lu Yi was not in a hurry to return to his cave. Since he had nothing to do, he strolled around the shops. In the past, if he wanted to buy anything, he would go to the 10,000 Elephant Island. However, in the future, if the Unparalleled Island had enough shops and goods, it would be more convenient for him to buy anything he wanted. After walking around for half a day, Lu Yi realized that the shops on the Unparalleled Island had a wide variety of products. It was already quite impressive. Of course, it was still far from the 10,000 elephant island. However, this was just the beginning. At the very least, the unparalleled island could provide everything the cultivators needed for their daily cultivation. There were also many cultivators doing business in the shops. The cultivators of the matchless island were patrolling the area to maintain the peace of the island. However, with a mid-stage moonjade cultivator like Tang Jun overseeing the island, no one dared to cause any trouble, lest they bring trouble upon themselves. Therefore, although the unparalleled island was quite popular now, everything was in order. After walking around for a while, Lu Yi returned to his cave. Thanks to Chu Shen's previous plan, the second half of the unparalleled island was not open to the public. Therefore, it was very quiet here. After a while, Chu Shen ran over excitedly. "Big brother!" Lu Yi nodded slightly and praised him. "Well done." Chu Shen smiled. "It's all thanks to Big Brother's strong support." If Lu Yi was not willing to let him stay here, with little dumb and crooked teeth, he would not have anything to do with the unparalleled island. Not to mention that the popularity of the unparalleled island was basically gathered by the twin chi connection disk. Without the disk array provided by Lu Yi, the unparalleled island was just a pure spiritual island. With the disk array, Chu Shen had the opportunity to build the unparalleled island into what it was now. Chu Shen did not come to ask for credit. He just came to report the development of the unparalleled island in the past 6 months to Lu Yi. Lu Yi was not interested in these. He just took out a storage ring and handed it to him. On the way back, Lu Yi did nothing else except to deduce the spirit inscriptions and refine the disk array. Chu Shen took it and inspected it, a look of joy appearing on his face. Not bothering to refuse Lu Yi, he happily put it away and said, "Big brother, although there are some profits from selling array discs in the shops, I want to keep them and use them to develop Peerless Island first. When there are more profits in the future, I will share them with Big Brother. What does Big Brother think?" The unparalleled island is indeed in need of money. You can make the decision yourself. Although Lu Yi needed to spend some spiritual jades recently, the development of the unparalleled island was undoubtedly more important. "Then I will do as I think." Lu Yi asked casually, "Is Bansi back?" Chu Shen said, "She is back. I asked her before why she didn't come back with you. She said you were delayed by something." Chu Shen knew that Bansi left with Lu Yi. When Bansi left at that time, she specifically told Chu Shen. Speaking of Bansi, Chu Shen lowered his voice and said, "Brother, what is the background of senior sister Bansi? You have been with her all this time. Have you tried to find out if she was sent by my mother?" Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't know. If you want to know, you can ask her yourself." Chu Shen's face was bitter. It's not easy to ask. Lu Yi did not know what he was worried about. He asked again, "Where is Puku?" He did not sense Puku's aura. As for Ghost, she was sent to the mermaid territory by him. Without him, she would not be able to come back. As for Puku, Lu Yi did not see him. He did not know what this guy was doing. Chu Shen's expression was a little strange. Senior brother Pu seems to be hiding. Hiding from what? Lu Yi did not understand. Chu Shen said, "Senior brother Pu has an arranged marriage. Not long ago, the other party came to look for him, and then senior brother Pu ran away." Lu Yi was stunned. He thought that Puku's arranged marriage was probably very ugly. Otherwise, why would he run away? End of chapter. Chapter 1506. Just as he was speaking, he suddenly sensed Yu Yao's aura rapidly approaching them. Lu Yi frowned. This was because he sensed that Yu Yao's aura wasn't Tang Jun's. Meanwhile, Chu Shen's face twitched. "You're right. Big brother, you're on your own." As he said this, he hurriedly got up and fled, as if he was very scared. He rushed out of the cave, but he was still blocked. Then, Lu Yi heard Chu Shen's humble voice. "Senior sister Wan." A cold voice rang out. "Li Taibai has returned." Chu Shen feigned ignorance. "Ah, I don't." Out of the way. As soon as she finished speaking, her clothes fluttered. Then, Lu Yi discovered that a slender figure had appeared in front of him. He looked up and carefully sized her up. He was momentarily surprised because he discovered that not only was this woman not ugly, but she was also extremely beautiful. Moreover, her figure was outstanding. She was large where she should be, and round where she should be. Even among cultivators, this woman's beauty was extremely eye-catching. Her hair was tied up in a high ponytail, and her clothes clung to her body. She appeared very capable and experienced. Lu Yi could even sense an extremely sharp aura from her body. This aura gave Lu Yi a somewhat familiar feeling. A sword cultivator. Lu Yi immediately understood. This woman was definitely a sword cultivator. He didn't quite understand. This kind of woman was Puku's favorite type. Moreover, since it was an arranged marriage, why was Puku avoiding her? The woman was very tall, and she looked down at Lu Yi from above. Her cold voice rang out. Yearly Tai-bai. Lu Yi nodded slightly. The woman said, I heard that you have the best relationship with Puku here. Do you know where he is? Lu Yi shook his head. He had just returned from outside. Who the hell knew where Puku had run off to? Can you help me ask around and find out where he is? No. Lu Yi decisively refused. Regardless of why Puku was avoiding this woman, as Puku's friend, Lu Yi naturally couldn't do such a thing. Then help me pass a message to him. He can't run away. Even if he has to go to the ends of the earth, I will find him. After the woman finished speaking, she turned around and left. She didn't want to make things difficult for Lu Yi. After the woman left, Lu Yi frowned. He didn't sense any malice from the woman. In other words, she didn't really want to do anything to Puku. However, he didn't know what Puku had done to her to make her so concerned. He must have abandoned her after playing with her. Lu Yi guessed that with Parker's character, there was a high chance that he would do something like this. He took out the musical note and tried to contact Puku. Not long after, Puku replied, What's up? A woman is looking for you. Want to, right? She really went to find you. She didn't make things difficult for you, did she? Lu Yi didn't know what the woman's name was. She didn't say anything, but Chu Shin did call her senior sister Wan. No, I'm just trying to find out your whereabouts. That's good. What did she say? She asked me to pass you a message. Lu Yi originally told him. Puku was silent for a long time before replying. I can't stay in the 10,000 elephant sea. Brotherly, I'm preparing to run away. We'll meet again if fate wills it. Lu Yi was surprised. I think that woman isn't bad. She's your type. Why are you hiding from her? It's a long story. Puku's tone was full of distress. After his explanation, Lu Yi finally understood what Puku was thinking. That Wan too was indeed betrothed to Puku. In terms of talent and cultivation, she wasn't any worse than Puku. In fact, she was even stronger than him. However, the woman was 10 years older than him. Puku had been by Wan Tu's side since he was very young. It could be said that Wan Tu had raised him single-handedly. To Puku, Wan Tu was like his own sister. If it were any other woman of such beauty, Puku would have been more than happy to accept. However, he really didn't have any thoughts about Wan Tuesday. As for abandoning her, that was even more impossible. Moreover, brotherly, you know that I have great ambitions. I want to drink all the water in one scoop. How could I hang myself on a single tree? Lu Yi had already experienced his ambition and knew that it was true. With Puku's personality, if he wasn't allowed to sleep in a brothel, it would be worse than killing him. After ending the communication with Puku, Lu Yi left the cave. He was powerless to interfere with Puku's future. The starry sky was vast. After this farewell, they might not have the chance to meet again in the future. However, cultivators were like this. On the road of life, they always had to experience all kinds of people and things. Meeting, getting to know each other, making friends, and parting were commonplace. Everyone was moving forward. If they were fated to meet again, they would naturally be happy. If they weren't fated to meet again, it would just be a memory in their hearts. Flying out of the 10,000 elephant sea, he found the desolate star from last time, and came to a hidden place. He blew the azure sea snail, and opened the door to the merfolk territory. Through the door he came to the heavenly snail hall. Ignoring the two male merfolk who stayed behind, Lu Yi directly urged his power, and waited quietly. In just a moment, Great Elder Yin Miao, who had sensed the commotion, rushed over. Behind him was the Spiritas woman with long hair that reached her ankles. Lu Yi had come this time to bring the Spiritas woman back. It was not a good idea to keep her here. After bowing to Yin Miao, Lu Yi asked, "How is Spectre? Did she say she wanted to leave?" Yin Miao smiled and said, "That little girl has been cultivating with Bai Lu. I'm afraid she won't be leaving anytime soon." Lu Yi could roughly guess Spectre's plan. She obviously wanted to cultivate here, until she reached the peak of the constellation realm. Then, she would leave and use the constellation hall to advance Yu Yao. Cultivating with Bai Lu would be much more efficient. She naturally didn't want to waste such an opportunity. Since Spectre didn't say she wanted to leave, Lu Yi didn't bother looking for her. He took the token that controlled the restriction on the Spiritas woman from Yin Miao, and said a few more words to Yin Miao. Then, before the door disappeared, he returned to the desolate star. Looking at the Spiritas woman standing quietly to the side, Lu Yi pondered for a moment and said, "I have some friends who lost their physical bodies for some reason. Only their soul avatars are still alive. I don't know what kind of existence the Spiritas is, or if you are similar to them. But I just want to ask you for a favor. Help them find a way out in the future." If he wanted the Spiritas woman to cooperate with him, Lu Yi couldn't hide anything. However, ever since he obtained this Spiritas woman, she hadn't spoken to him except when she ambushed him. This time was the same. Lu Yi wanted to confide in her, but she clearly didn't want to talk to him. She just looked at him indifferently. Lu Yi sighed helplessly, and could only give up. He still had a long way to go, and he didn't even know how to return to the 9 states. Even if the Spiritas woman was willing to help him, he couldn't do it. Summoning his star boat, he rushed off in the direction of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. If the Spiritas woman didn't use her secret technique, on the surface, she was no different from a normal human. Moreover, her race was special, so Lu Yi wasn't worried that she would intentionally expose her identity, so it didn't matter if he brought her along. Along the way, Lu Yi took out a sound talisman and sent out a message, soon receiving a response. A few days later, on the 10,000 Elephant Island, the scattered market, Lu Yi saw a familiar face at the agreed place, and just said with a bitter face, "Fellow Taoist, I've been looking for you for a long time." Back when Lu Yi bought all the dragon breath crystals on Nja's side, Nja had returned to the scattered market 3 months ago to transfer the goods. He had returned to the scattered market 3 months ago, but he couldn't get in touch with Lu Yi. For a moment, he wondered if Lu Yi had encountered some kind of accident. It wasn't until Lu Yi took the initiative to contact him that he was overjoyed. After all, he had transferred a lot of dragon breath crystals from the scattered market. If it weren't for a big customer like Lu Yi, who knew how long it would have taken him to sell all the dragon breath crystals in the scattered market. "I went out on a business trip and only returned a few days ago," Lu Yi explained. Nja asked, "Fellow Taoist, do you still want more dragon breath crystals?" "Since I've contacted you, of course I do." Nja was overjoyed, and he asked cautiously, "May I know how many dragon breath crystals you can buy this time?" Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, "I only have 7 million spirit jades on hand for now. How many dragon breath crystals can I buy?" He still had 8 million spirit jades on hand, but he still had to save 1 million spirit jades for later use. As for spirit crystals, he would save them if he could. He would need them when he evolved into a Yu Yao in the future, and they were much more valuable than spirit jades. 7 million. That's not a small amount, Nja said as he counted the dragon breath crystals. After a short while, he handed a few storage rings to Lu Yi and said, "Fellow Taoist, please take a look at the number." Lu Yi took the storage rings and checked them, and he quickly finished counting them. He found that Nja had given him a little too much, so it could be considered a friendly discount. "Fellow Taoist, if you want more dragon breath crystals in the future, feel free to send me a message. I don't have many things here, but I have a lot of dragon breath crystals," Nja said with a smile. Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat, and he said, "Fellow Taoistan, are you interested in taking over a shop?" Nja said, "Of course I am interested. After all, it's better to do business in a shop than in a scattered market." However, fellow Taoist, you should know that not everyone can set up a shop. Those popular spiritual islands are out of our reach, and those unpopular spiritual islands are useless, even if we set up a shop. It's better to set up a shop here. What Inja said was right. For a top-grade spiritual island like the Island of Versatility, the rent for every shop was extremely high. Moreover, it was not something that could be bought with money alone. One also needed some connections. The realm Inja came from could not even take over a shop on a top-grade spiritual island. Not to mention the Island of Versatility, Inja's realm did not even have the capital and power to take over a shop on a top-grade spiritual island. He did not have the capital or the resources. Some of the less popular spiritual islands were not too expensive. But what was the point of going there? It would be a waste. Lu Yi said, if there is a spiritual island that is popular and is still growing, it will not be any worse than a top-grade spiritual island in the future. Fellow Taoist, would you be willing to move there? Inja said hesitantly, the rent for a shop on such a spiritual island will not be low, right? I'm not sure about the exact amount, but the spiritual island is developing now. The rent should not be too expensive. End of chapter. Chapter 1507. Inja said thoughtfully, are you talking about the Matchless Island? Among the spiritual islands on the 10,000 Manifestation Sea, the Matchless Island was the only one that was developing and growing in popularity. It is the Matchless Island. Inja seemed to have heard of the Matchless Island, so this matter was easy to handle. The Matchless Island is indeed not bad. There are signs of great success. I have been there before, but there are some conditions to rent a shop on the Matchless Island. To be honest, the domain I come from is not strong enough to meet the requirements of the Matchless Island. The partners that Chu Shun was seeking cooperation with were all forces with a good foundation. In this way, their interests could be tied together, and the safety and stability of the Matchless Island would be increased. The domain behind Inja was not strong enough, so it was not within Chu Shun's consideration. So even though Inja had thought about setting up a shop on the Matchless Island, he gave up the idea after asking, if you have this intention, go to the Matchless Island to find the island master Chu Shun. Tell him that I asked you to go, and he will arrange it. Inja's eyes lit up. You know the island master Chu Shun? Lu Yi nodded. Inja was suddenly tempted. He understood that since Lu Yi dared to say so, it was not as simple as just knowing him. Moreover, Lu Yi was generous with his money, so it was obvious that he had an extraordinary background. It would not be strange if he was related to Chu Shun. After thanking Lu Yi, he excitedly flew in the direction of the Matchless Island. Lu Yi did not leave, but cast his gaze not far away. There was a stall in that direction, and behind the stall sat a beautiful woman. The cultivators coming and going stopped in front of her stall, asked a few questions, and then shook their heads and left. When there was no one in front of the stall, Lu Yi strode forward. Do you need spirit pills? You can take a look. The stall owner greeted warmly, but then stared at Lu Yi in surprise. It's you? This stall owner was the woman who sold spirit pills that Lu Yi had met the last time he came. The woman's pill refining skills should be very good. The quality of the spirit pills she refined was very good. But the price was slightly more expensive than the Myriad Manifestation Chamber of Commerce. Lu Yi had bought all her spirit pills last time, and this time she had refined some more to sell. Lu Yi had asked Chu Shun to send people here to search, but according to Chu Shun's follow-up information, they did not find this woman. But unexpectedly this time they coincidentally met again. Lu Yi squatted down and casually picked up a jade bottle. Opening the bottle, he gently sniffed the pill fragrance. The woman said, "Don't worry, fellow Taoist. The quality of the pills I refine is guaranteed." Lu Yi believed this. Because of the talent tree, he could directly judge the quality of spirit pills better than others. "I bought them all," Lu Yi said. The woman was pleasantly surprised. Last time, Lu Yi had bought all of her spirit pills, and this time, he was actually so generous. It was obvious that he was not short of money. She quickly counted the number of spirit pills she had and quoted a price. Lu Yi didn't haggle with her, and paid her without hesitation. The woman received the spirit jade and smiled sweetly. Fellow Taoist, do you want to exchange musical notes? If you want to buy any spirit pills in the future, just send me a message. If fellow Taoist needs any special spirit pills, I can also refine them for you. You can refine all kinds of spirit pills? Lu Yi asked. Basically, I can refine all the spirit pills in the market. Lu Yi nodded and asked, are you interested in opening a shop? He didn't ask if she was interested in relying on him, because the woman's alchemy skills were very good. If she really wanted to rely on a force, she would have done so long ago. Since she chose to set up a stall here, it meant that she was not someone who was willing to be restricted. There were many people like this among cultivators. However, being unwilling to rely on a force and be restricted did not mean that she was unwilling to open a shop. Hearing this, the woman smiled. Of course I want to, but I don't have the money. Lu Yi said, go to Peerless Island and find Island Master Chu Shun. He will give you a shop. You don't need to pay a single spirit jade. You only need to sell your spirit pills there. The woman looked at Lu Yi with some vigilance. Although she hadn't been in the Wanxiang Sea for long, she knew that there was no such thing as kindness for no reason. If Lu Yi simply wanted to do business with her, she would welcome him. However, if he had any ulterior motives, she would naturally be wary. Sensing her thoughts, Lu Yi explained, I have a few friends who are also medical cultivators. In the future, they might ask you for advice on alchemy. When the time comes, I hope you can teach them some of your own experience and insights. Medical cultivators from the 9 states would come here sooner or later. For example, second senior sister, Wuxia, and the others. If there was no one to guide them, they would definitely waste a lot of time. After all, the types and characteristics of the medicinal herbs in the starry sky could not be compared to those produced in the 9 states. There were many medicinal herbs and spirit pills in the starry sky that did not exist in the 9 states. The woman's alchemy skills were not bad. If she could teach them, second senior sister, and the others would be able to learn easily. That's it. The woman was obviously still in disbelief. That's it. Then can I think about it? The woman asked cautiously. No problem. Lu Yi did not force her. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Looking at his back, the woman was confused for a moment. The Matchless Island was very famous recently. After all, it was a newly risen spiritual island. Moreover, its rise was unusually fast. It had already spread across the Wanxiang Sea. If Anja could hear about the Matchless Island, the woman would naturally have heard of it too. She had never thought that she could own a shop of her own. Moreover, it was in a place like the Matchless Island. Now that the opportunity was in front of her, she was naturally tempted. However, she still decided to go to the Matchless Island to see the situation before making any plans. If she could really get a shop without any additional conditions that would make her feel awkward, it would naturally be a good thing. The woman set off for the Matchless Island. Lu Yi was already on his way back. On the way back, he sent a message to Chu Shun and told him about Anja and the woman. Naturally, Chu Shun agreed. There were still some empty shops on the Matchless Island. As the island owner, it was naturally not a problem for him to keep 2 as backup. After returning to the cave on the Matchless Island, Lu Yi prepared to cultivate. It had been almost a year since he had advanced to the later stage of the constellation realm. In this year, his cultivation had stagnated. The main reason was that his cultivation had progressed too quickly previously. He wanted to settle down a little. A year was not a long time. However, Lu Yi felt that he had settled down enough. It was time to move on. Moreover, even if he started cultivating, he could control his cultivation speed. As long as he did not go deep into the Wanxiang Sea and only refine spiritual jades, there would be a limit to his cultivation speed. Lu Yi had no plans to go deep into the Wanxiang Sea for the time being. Firstly, the woman from the Soul tribe was by his side. It was not appropriate for him to go deep into the Wanxiang Sea. Secondly, cultivating in the Wanxiang Sea would consume too much spiritual jades. Although he had just received 7 million spiritual jades worth of dragon breath crystal from Anja, if he really went into the Wanxiang Sea, it would not last long. He did not need to worry about the development of the Matchless Island. He increasingly felt that it was a wise decision to leave Chu Shen behind. Otherwise, he would have to spend a lot of time and effort to manage the island by himself. Moreover, he did not have Chu Shen's background. Currently, the reason why the Matchless Island could cooperate with various factions was because of Chu Shen's background. Although he did not mention his own background, which of the powerhouses of the top factions did not know that he had Jiu Yin behind him? With such a relationship, Chu Shen could achieve twice the result with half the effort. Only those people from the Carp Island who did not know of Chu Shen's background and rashly invaded the island. In the end, they were killed and suffered heavy losses. Days passed. Other than refining the spirit jades for cultivation, Lu Yi also let the talent tree absorb the power of the dragon breath crystal. He also forged many twin chi link branch array discs and gave them to Chu Shen from time to time, asking him to sell them. Occasionally, he would find opportunities to talk to the Soul Clan woman. However, the Soul Clan woman had no intention of responding to him. It was as if she wanted to remain silent until the end of time. This woman was too difficult to deal with. Lu Yi did not know how to break through her defenses. Until now, he did not even know her name. On this day, Lu Yi was cultivating in the cave. Suddenly, he frowned and looked down at the back of his hand. It was boiling hot. Just as Lu Yi was wondering what had happened, a mark suddenly appeared out of thin air. Seeing the appearance of this mark, Lu Yi was first startled and then overjoyed. This was because this mark was in the shape of a green leaf. There were two kinds of marks on the back of his hand. One was a battlefield mark. However, this thing only had an effect within the 9 provinces. Ever since he left the 9 provinces, it no longer reacted. After all, this was a mark bestowed by the heavens of the 9 provinces, and was connected to the heavens. The other mark was the reincarnation tree's mark. He had followed Yang Qing to the reincarnation tree. When they left, the reincarnation tree had bestowed him this mark. At that time, Lu Yi had hidden 2 evil spirits, and wanted to bring them back to the 9 provinces. However, the reincarnation tree had seen through him. Helpless, Lu Yi could only release the 2 evil spirits. As compensation, the reincarnation tree bestowed him this mark. According to Yang Qing, the reincarnation tree's mark was not casually bestowed. Although it was said to be compensation for Lu Yi, it was also a bet by the reincarnation tree. The reincarnation tree reincarnated once every 10,000 years. At this time, the reincarnation tree would be incomparably weak, and very likely be coveted by others. When that time came, the reincarnation tree could invite experts who had been bestowed the mark to come and protect it. With this mark, the cultivator could enter the reincarnation tree at any time and place. Therefore, the reincarnation tree's mark was usually bestowed to cultivators who were extremely favored by the reincarnation tree. Usually, one would not be seen for hundreds or thousands of years. The reincarnation tree bestowed a mark to Lu Yi, indicating that it thought highly of him. Previously, when he was stranded in the Wanxiang galaxy and could not find his way home, Lu Yi had thought about whether he should use this mark to ask the reincarnation tree directly. The reincarnation tree's clones were all over the major galaxies. With its clones in the 9 provinces, the reincarnation tree would definitely know the specific location of the 9 provinces. End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.